The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. For 1,000 generations, the Jedi have served as its guardians, interpreting its will and maintaining balance. But what happens when something arrives that exists entirely outside the Force's influence, a power so absolute that even the midichlorians cannot touch it? The sky above Coruscant Senatorial District tore open like fabric ripping at the seams. Not a hyperspace emergence. Not a ship-breaking atmosphere. Something else entirely, a wound in reality itself, crackling with energies that registered on no known scanner. Emergency klaxons wailed across the ecumenopolis as billions looked upward to witness a phenomenon that defied every law of physics the Republic had catalogued in 25,000 years of space travel. Through the rift came fire. A humanoid figure, wreathed in flames that burned without consuming, plummeted toward the planet's surface at terminal velocity. The figure's descent carved a burning contrail through Coruscant's perpetual traffic streams, scattering airspeeders and causing 3 separate collisions in the Uskra district. Jedi Temple sensors screamed warnings as the object, no, the being, crossed into the planet's gravitational well with enough kinetic energy to level a city block. But it didn't crash. 20 meters above the temple's landing platform, the figure's descent simply stopped. Flames dissipated like morning fog, revealing a man suspended in midair wearing a skin-tight suit of blue and red, a cape billowing despite the absence of wind. For 3 seconds, he hung there, disoriented, his eyes glowing with an inner light that made even the distant sun seem dim by comparison. Then he dropped. The Kryptonian hit Durasteel with enough force to crack the platform's reinforced surface, creating a spiderweb pattern of fractures that radiated outward for 10 meters. But he caught himself on one knee, head bowed, breathing hard. When he finally looked up, his eyes, blue as hyperspace and somehow infinitely sad, took in the impossible cityscape surrounding him. This wasn't Earth. This wasn't even his universe. By Rao, Superman whispered, his superhearing already overwhelmed by the cacophony of 1 trillion voices speaking 1,000 languages across the planet-wide city. Where am I? The answer came in the form of 15 lightsabers igniting simultaneously. Jedi Temple guards emerged from the shadows of the ornate pillars surrounding the platform, their yellow blades humming with plasma energy. Behind them, 2 figures approached with more measured steps, a Keldor wearing a breathing mask and ornate robes, and a female Togruta whose montrals marked her as a senior Padawan or young knight. Identify yourself, the Keldor commanded, his voice filtered through the mask's respirator. Master Plo Koon had seen many strange things in his centuries of life, but never had he encountered a being whose presence in the Force was so utterly absent. Not suppressed like a Sith. Not hidden like certain trained operatives. Simply not there, as if the man didn't exist in the fundamental fabric of reality itself. You have violated the sovereign space of the Jedi Temple. By what authority do you? Superman rose to his full height, cape settling around his shoulders. Even weakened from his journey through dimensional boundaries, even operating at diminished capacity as his cells struggled to process this galaxy's unfamiliar solar radiation, his presence commanded attention. He stood 6'3" of impossible power wrapped in the bearing of a Kansas farmboy who'd been taught that might meant nothing without responsibility. I don't know how I got here, Superman said, hands raised in a gesture of peace. There was a fight. The Phantom Zone projector malfunctioned, and then, he gestured helplessly at the massive city surrounding them. I'm not your enemy. My name is Kal-El. Some people call me Superman. I'm lost, and I need help finding my way home. The Togruta, Ahsoka Tano, recently returned from a mission in the Outer Rim, studied him with the intense focus of youth combined with hard-earned combat experience. Master Plo, he's not lying. I can sense I can't sense him at all in the Force. It's like he's a void. But his body language, his voice, he's telling the truth. Or he's trained to deceive even Jedi intuition, Plo Koon countered, though his tone suggested he agreed with his former student. The Separatists have deployed many unconventional weapons. Count Dooku grows more desperate with each passing month. I don't know who that is, Superman said, lowering his hands slowly. I don't know where I am or what war you're fighting. But I can tell you this, I'm not a weapon. I'm a refugee. And wherever I am, if people need help, The temple guard closest to Superman moved with Jedi speed, his lightsaber arcing toward the stranger's exposed neck in a testing strike, not meant to kill, but to disable. The blade that could cut through durasteel and vaporize flesh met Superman's skin and simply stopped, the plasma edge pressing against invulnerable tissue without leaving so much as a mark. Superman didn't flinch. He'd been stabbed, shot, bombed, and hit with God-killing weapons. A sword made of superheated plasma was impressive, but it wasn't kryptonite, magic, or red sun radiation. The three things in his universe that could actually hurt him. The temple guard stumbled backward, his training failing him as cognitive dissonance warred with centuries of Jedi philosophy. Lightsabers cut through everything. Everything. Except, apparently, this impossible man in the colorful suit. Stand down. Plo Koon's command cracked like a whip. The guard deactivated his blade, but 15 others remained ignited, their wielders taking combat stances around Superman in a perfect defensive perimeter. From within the temple's depths, a presence approached, ancient, vast, and patient as stone. The guards parted without being ordered, creating a path for a figure who walked with a jimmer stick despite needing no assistance. Grand Master Yoda moved with the slow deliberation of someone who had watched empires rise and fall, his 800-year-old eyes missing nothing as he studied the man who existed outside the Force itself. Calm yourselves, you must, Yoda said, his voice carrying effortless authority. Hostile, this stranger is not. Lost, he is. Afraid, perhaps. But an enemy? The ancient Jedi Master's ears twitched, a gesture Superman would later learn indicated deep contemplation. No. Something else entirely. Yoda planted his jimmer stick and looked up at Superman with eyes that had witnessed the Republic's entire history. A question for you, I have, young stranger. The Force, feel it, can you? Superman blinked, genuinely confused. The Force? I don't understand what that means. Ahsoka gasped. Plo Koon's hand tightened on his lightsaber hilt. Across the platform, temple guards exchanged glances of disbelief. To not know the Force was like not knowing about gravity or light, it was fundamental, omnipresent, the foundation of reality itself. Yoda's expression, however, remained thoughtful. Interesting. Most interesting, indeed. A being of great power you are, sense this much, I can, though in the Force, no presence you have. A mystery, you represent. Dangerous mysteries, these are. But also, his expression softened almost imperceptibly. Opportunities, they may be. The ancient master turned to Plo Koon. To the council chambers, escort him. Inform Master Windu and Master Kenobi. An emergency session, we must convene. He looked back at Superman. Your name, you said, is Kal-El. Yes, sir, Superman replied, falling back on the respect for elders his parents had instilled in him. Both sets of parents, Jor-El and Lara on Krypton, Jonathan and Martha in Kansas. Though most people call me Clark. Clark Kent. Then, Clark Kent, Yoda said, and Superman heard genuine welcome beneath the caution, to the Jedi Temple, welcome you are. Your arrival, no accident it is, I think. The Force works in mysterious ways. Even, he added with what might have been the ghost of a smile, through those untouched by it. As temple guards formed an escort around him, protective or preventative, Superman couldn't quite tell, the last son of Krypton allowed himself to be led into the massive structure that dominated Coruscant's skyline. Behind him, the rift that had torn him from his reality sealed itself shut with a sound like thunder, leaving no trace except a fading radiation signature that would puzzle Republic scientists for months. In a meditation chamber deep within the Jedi Temple, a holographic figure flickered to life, an elderly human male with kind eyes and a gray beard. Qui-Gon Jinn's Force Ghost watched the proceedings with interest, sensing something even the living Jedi could not, the arrival of an individual whose very existence would force the galaxy to confront a question it had never needed to ask. What happens when ultimate power meets ultimate wisdom? And in a galaxy at war, orchestrated by a Sith Lord who had spent decades engineering the perfect trap, what does the arrival of an incorruptible variable mean for the grand plan? Outside, Coruscant's twin suns began their descent toward the horizon, their light washing over Superman's upturned face. His cells drank in the radiation, different wavelength, different intensity, but still solar energy. Still power. His strength began returning, his senses sharpening, his connection to the light that had always defined him reasserting itself. He didn't know it yet, but in a shadowy office beneath the Senate building, Chancellor Palpatine felt a disturbance, not in the Force, but in his carefully laid plans. Something had arrived in his galaxy that his visions had never predicted. Something that didn't play by the rules the Sith had spent millennia mastering. The Clone Wars had just become infinitely more complicated. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Jedi Council chamber occupied the temple's highest spire, a circular room with panoramic windows offering an unobstructed view of Coruscant's endless cityscape. 12 seats arranged in a perfect circle, each occupied by a master who had dedicated their lives to understanding the Force and maintaining peace across the galaxy. Today, 10 of those seats were filled: Masters Windu, Yoda, Plo Koon, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Shaak Ti, C.C. Tyan, Agen Kolar, Kit Fisto, Stas Ali, and via hologram from the front lines, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Superman stood in the center of the circle, acutely aware that he was being evaluated by some of the most powerful beings this galaxy had to offer. His X-ray vision, now functioning at nearly full capacity after an hour of solar absorption, told him their physiology was fascinating. Multiple hearts, different lung structures, exotic brain patterns that suggested telepathic capability. But he kept his vision respectfully surface level. These people had shown him hospitality despite their obvious concerns, and invading their privacy felt wrong. Mace Windu leaned forward, his dark eyes intense with the focus that had made him the Order's greatest warrior. You claim you're from another reality entirely. That this Phantom Zone tore you from your universe and deposited you in ours. His tone made it clear how skeptical he was. We have encountered many strange phenomena, but interdimensional travel has always been purely theoretical. I'm not a theorist, Master Windu, Superman replied, keeping his voice even and respectful. I'm living proof. In my universe, I'm from a planet called Krypton. It was destroyed when I was an infant. I was sent to Earth, a planet in what you'd probably call the unknown regions, and raised by human farmers named Jonathan and Martha Kentucky. He met Windu's gaze steadily. The yellow sun of that solar system gave me abilities that humans considered miraculous. Strength. Speed. Flight. Near invulnerability. I used those gifts to protect Earth, to save lives, to stand between innocent people and threats they couldn't face alone. A noble calling, Obi-Wan's hologram observed, stroking his beard thoughtfully. The Jedi Master was aboard a Venator-class Star Destroyer somewhere in the Mid-Rim, coordinating a campaign against separatist forces, but his attention was fully present. Yet you must understand our caution. The Force is the foundation of our philosophy, our abilities, our understanding of life itself. To encounter a being who exists outside it entirely, he gestured helplessly. It challenges our fundamental assumptions about reality. Assumptions worth challenging, perhaps they are, Yoda interjected from his seat, his Jimmer stick resting across his lap. 800 years, I have studied the Force. Seen much, I have. But this, he gestured toward Superman with one three-fingered hand. Something new, this is. A piece that fits no existing puzzle. Ki-Adi-Mundi, his elongated cranium housing a binary brain capable of processing multiple tactical scenarios simultaneously, spoke with the precision of a military strategist. The security implications are staggering. You demonstrated invulnerability to a lightsaber, a weapon that has no equal in destructive capability. You arrived via an unexplained phenomenon that our sensors couldn't detect. For all we know, you could be a separatist weapon designed to infiltrate the temple. If I wanted to infiltrate you, Superman said quietly, I wouldn't have landed on your front door and asked for help. I would have used my abilities to gather intelligence covertly. He paused, recognizing he needed to demonstrate trust to earn it. My hearing can detect conversations happening across this entire city planet. My vision can see through walls, identify people by their unique skeletal structure and heartbeat patterns. I could have learned everything about your order without ever revealing myself. The temperature in the chamber dropped several degrees. Hands moved closer to lightsaber hilts. Even Kit Fisto's perpetually cheerful expression darkened. Mace Windu stood, his presence suddenly dominating the room. You're telling the Council of the Jedi Order that you've been spying on us since you arrived? No, Superman said firmly, holding his ground. I'm telling you I could have, but I didn't. Because that's not who I am. I'm being transparent about my capabilities so you understand what I'm choosing not to do with them. He looked around the circle, meeting each master's eyes in turn. In my world, I was called the Man of Steel. But steel can be forged into a sword or a plowshare. I chose to be the plowshare. I chose to build, to protect, to save. Those choices define me more than my powers ever could. Shakti, her head tail swaying slightly as she processed this information through both logic and force intuition, spoke with the measured tone of someone accustomed to training entire clone armies. Your philosophy aligns with Jedi principles, power in service to life, strength tempered by wisdom. Yet you're not a Jedi. You cannot touch the Force, and it cannot guide you. How do you know your choices are correct? Superman's expression softened, pain flickering across his features. I don't. Not always. I've made mistakes that cost lives. I've had to choose between impossible options where someone always suffers. But I have something the Force can't provide, the memory of Jonathan Kent, a man who had no powers at all, teaching me that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. His voice carried the weight of lived experience. He died of a heart attack I couldn't prevent. All my power, all my speed, and I couldn't save the man who taught me what it meant to be human. That's my guide. Not destiny, not cosmic energy, but the memory of a good man who believed I could be better than my abilities. The chamber fell silent. Several council members exchanged glances, communicating through subtle force impressions that Superman couldn't perceive but could recognize in their body language. Yoda's ears drooped slightly. Superman would learn this indicated deep sympathy. Loss, you have known. Purpose forged from grief, you carry. A Jedi's path, this resembles, though by different roads, you walk it. Master Yoda, Aegon Kohler spoke up, his Zabrak features arranged in a concerned frown. We cannot ignore the tactical situation. Count Dooku has spent 2 years trying to turn the war in the Separatists' favor. If he learns of this being's existence, if the Sith discover someone whose power rivals or exceeds Force abilities, they will stop at nothing to corrupt, control, or destroy him. The Sith? Superman's enhanced hearing had already picked up the word several times since his arrival, always spoken with a mixture of fear and hatred. Your temple guards mentioned them. Who are they? Obi-Wan's hologram flickered slightly as the transmission compensated for solar interference. The ancient enemies of the Jedi. Users of the Force's dark side, passion, rage, hatred channeled into terrible power. For 1,000 years, we believed them extinct. 2 years ago, we learned otherwise. His expression hardened. Count Dooku, once a respected Jedi Master, now leads the Separatist Alliance. He is Sith. And his master, Darth Sidious, remains hidden, orchestrating this war from the shadows. Superman's mind, trained by years of investigative journalism at the Daily Planet, immediately began piecing together patterns. A hidden master manipulating a galactic war. A former Jedi turned to darkness. Political chaos benefiting someone in the shadows. "You're fighting a war on two fronts," he said slowly. The military conflict against the Separatists and a shadow war against Sith manipulation. And you don't know where the real enemy is. Perceptive, you are, Yoda acknowledged. Clouded by the dark side, the future has become. Victory or defeat, unclear both remain. Into this uncertainty, you have arrived, a peace the Sith Lord did not foresee, cannot predict, might not even sense. Mace Windu resumed his seat, his expression transitioning from suspicion to strategic calculation. Which makes you either our greatest asset or our most dangerous liability. If Dooku learns about you, he'll want to study you, replicate your abilities, or turn you against the Republic. If Sidious discovers you exist outside the Force's influence, he paused, letting the implication hang. The Sith have spent millennia believing the dark side makes them invincible. You're living proof that power exists beyond their philosophy. That threatens their entire worldview. Then don't tell them, Superman suggested. I'm not interested in your politics or your war. I just want to find a way home. Home may not exist, young Kal-El, C.C. Tyan said, his voice carrying the matter-of-fact tone of a pilot who'd calculated impossible odds too many times. Interdimensional rifts don't simply open at random. The energy required would dwarf anything the Republic has achieved, even at the height of its technological advancement. If your Phantom Zone device malfunctioned in your universe, the chances of replicating that exact phenomenon in ours, he shook his head. Astronomical doesn't begin to describe it. Superman felt the words like a physical blow. Somewhere back on Earth, Lois was probably organizing search parties. Bruce was analyzing the Phantom Zone's energy signature. Diana might be consulting with Olympian scholars about dimensional tiers. His parents, his adoptive parents in Smallville, would be worried sick. And he was trapped in a galaxy that didn't even exist in his reality's cosmic geography. He took a slow breath, centering himself the way he'd learned during meditation sessions with John Johns. Panic helped no one. Despair saved no lives. Then until I find a way back, I'll do what I've always done. If people need help, I'll help them. If there's danger, I'll face it. Whether the Force guides you or not, whether this is my universe or not, the principles I live by don't change. Spoken like a true Jedi, Plo Koon observed, respect coloring his filtered voice. Or a dangerous idealist, Ki-Adi-Mundi countered. Master Windu, we cannot simply release him into the galaxy. The risks are matched by the potential benefits, Obi-Wan interrupted, his hologram leaning forward intently. Forgive my bluntness, but we're losing this war. The Separatists outproduce us 5-1 in battle droids. Our clone army, for all its effectiveness, is stretched across thousands of systems. Jedi are dying at a rate we haven't seen since the ancient Sith Wars. If this man, Superman, is genuinely committed to protecting life, we'd be fools to imprison him out of fear. Or we'd be fools to trust him blindly, Mace countered. Kenobi, your optimism has served you well, but we cannot afford mistakes of this magnitude. In his universe, he'd been the strange one, the alien trying to fit into humanity. Here, in a galaxy teeming with 1,000 species, he was somehow even more alien. Not because of his appearance, but because of his fundamental nature. He existed in a philosophical blind spot these people couldn't reconcile with their understanding of reality. Yoda's Jimmer stick striking the floor silenced the debate instantly. Decide this by committee, we cannot. Test him, we must. Trust earned through action, it is, not granted through words. The Grand Master's ancient eyes fixed on Superman with an intensity that suggested he saw far more than physical form. 3 days, you have. Remain in the temple. Learn our ways. Let us learn yours. Then decide, the Council shall, what role you play in this galaxy's fate. And if I refuse? Superman asked, not because he intended to, but because he needed to know if these people would respect his agency. Yoda's expression was unreadable. Force you, we cannot. Stop you, we probably could not. But wisdom, you seem to possess. 3 days to understand your situation, to explore possibilities, to demonstrate your character. Unreasonable, this is not. Superman considered for a long moment, then nodded. 3 days. But I have conditions. No surveillance in my quarters. No force tricks to read my mind or influence my decisions. And if someone out there, he gestured toward the vast city beyond the windows, needs help while I'm waiting, I'm not going to stand by and watch them suffer just because you're deciding if I'm trustworthy. Mace Windu's expression suggested this was exactly the kind of independent thinking that concerned him. But Yoda chuckled, a dry, ancient sound like wine through dead leaves. Agreed, your terms are. But one condition of our own, we add, accompany you, a Jedi shall. Learn from each other, you both might. Watch each other, you both will. Yoda's eyes gleamed with something that might have been mischief. Skywalker, young Anakin. Recall him from the front, we shall. A partnership, perhaps, beneficial to both it proves. Superman didn't know who Anakin Skywalker was, but he recognized a test when he heard one. They were pairing him with someone significant, someone whose reactions would tell the Council everything they needed to know about how Superman operated. Fair enough. He'd been evaluated before. The Justice League had tested him. Batman had contingency plans for him. The entire world watched his every move with hope and fear in equal measure. What was one more test? I can work with that, Superman agreed. As the council session concluded and temple guards arrived to escort him to guest quarters, Superman took one last look at the Jedi Masters arrayed in their circle. Powerful beings, wise leaders, warriors and philosophers bound by ancient traditions. They were good people trying to do right in impossible circumstances. But something nagged at him, a reporter's instinct honed by years of chasing stories Clark Kent had written for the Daily Planet. These people were fighting a war they didn't fully understand against an enemy they couldn't locate. And somehow, their entire philosophy was built around an energy field that supposedly connected all living things. So why couldn't that energy field tell them where their true enemy was hiding? It was a question worth pursuing. But first, he needed to understand this galaxy, these people, and the war that was tearing their civilization apart. Then, maybe, he could figure out how to help. Or how to get home. Preferably both. The quarters assigned to Superman occupied a corner of the temple's guest wing, spacious by monastic standards, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Coruscant's endless sprawl. Meditation cushions rested in one corner. A simple sleeping platform occupied another. A refresher unit, this galaxy's equivalent of a bathroom, hummed quietly behind a privacy screen. The room's austerity reminded him of his fortress of solitude, though that Arctic sanctuary had been filled with Kryptonian technology and the echoing loneliness of being the last son of a dead world. Here, he wasn't even the last of anything. Just the only. Superman stood at the window, watching the sun set over the Ecumenopolis. His cells drank in the fading light with desperate hunger, metabolizing the radiation with increasing efficiency. 24 hours in this galaxy, and his body had already adapted remarkably. The twin suns of Coruscant, smaller than Earth's soul but paired in a binary configuration, produced a unique radiation cocktail his Kryptonian physiology was learning to process. Heat vision now functioned at 90% capacity. Flight felt natural again. His strength had returned to levels that would let him move starships if necessary. The door chimed, a soft, musical tone that announced a visitor without demanding entry. Superman's X-ray vision reflexively scanned beyond the durasteel, revealing a young man in Jedi robes standing in the corridor. Early 20s, athletic build, mechanical right arm hidden beneath brown fabric, lightsaber hanging at his belt. His heartbeat was elevated, nervous, but also excited. Behind his eyes, something burned with an intensity that reminded Superman uncomfortably of his own younger self. "Come in," Superman called. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Anakin Skywalker entered with the controlled confidence of someone who'd been told he was special since childhood and was still trying to figure out what that meant. His blue eyes, nearly the same shade as Superman's, swept across the room with tactical assessment before settling on the man standing at the window. "So you're the guy who's got the entire council arguing," Anakin said, dispensing with formal greetings. "I'm Anakin Skywalker. Apparently, I'm your babysitter for the next 3 days." Superman turned, studying the young Jedi with the investigative instincts that had made Clark Kent one of Metropolis's best reporters. Body language suggested recent combat experience, slight favoring of his left side, hypervigilance in unfamiliar spaces, hand never straying far from his weapon. But there was something else, too. A restlessness. An energy that couldn't quite find an outlet. "Superman," he replied, extending his hand. "Though most people call me Clark. And I think diplomatic liaison sounds better than babysitter, don't you?" Anakin's grin was sudden and genuine, transforming his face from serious warrior to mischievous young man. He clasped Superman's hand, and immediately his eyes widened as he tried unsuccessfully to squeeze. It was like gripping durasteel wrapped in flesh. "Okay, the reports weren't exaggerating. You really are invulnerable." "Not invulnerable," Superman corrected, releasing the handshake. "Just very difficult to hurt. There are things in my universe that can harm me. Kryptonite, radioactive fragments of my homeworld. Magic, which bypasses my physical defenses. Red sun radiation, which removes my powers entirely." He gestured toward the setting suns. "Your stars are different from mine. For the first day, I was weaker than I've been in years. Now, I'm adapting." Anakin moved to the window, standing beside Superman to watch the light show of billions of speeders crisscrossing the cityscape below. "Master Yoda said you exist outside the Force. I didn't really understand what that meant until I walked in here. It's like, there's a void where you should be. Not dark side void, that's cold and hungry. Just, absence. Like trying to see a shadow in absolute darkness. Is that disturbing?" Superman asked carefully. "Honestly?" Anakin shrugged. "It's kind of refreshing. Every Jedi I know, I can sense their emotions, their intentions, their presence in the Force. It's like being in a room where everyone's thoughts are playing on loudspeakers turned down low. You're just a normal person." Well, he glanced at Superman's physique, a normal person who can apparently bend durasteel with his bare hands and shrug off lightsabers. Superman smiled slightly. "Where I come from, I spend a lot of energy trying to seem normal. Wearing glasses, hunching my shoulders, pretending to be clumsy. Anything to make people forget I'm different." He looked down at his suit, the bright colors that Jonathan Kent had helped him design, meant to inspire hope rather than fear. "But this version of me, the one wearing the symbol of my house, he doesn't hide. He can't afford to." "The S?" Anakin asked, gesturing to the stylized emblem on Superman's chest. "It's not an S in my language. It's the Kryptonian symbol for hope." Superman traced the design with one finger. "My birth father, Jor-El, wore it. He was a scientist who tried to save our world and failed. When he sent me to Earth, he included this suit with a message: they can be a great people, Kal-El, if they wish to be. They only lack the light to show the way. He wanted me to be that light." Anakin was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. "That's a lot of pressure to put on a kid." "It was," Superman agreed. "But my Earth father, Jonathan Kent, helped me understand it differently. He said the symbol didn't mean I had to save everyone. It meant I had to try. That the trying mattered more than the succeeding." His voice softened with memory. He taught me that hope isn't about winning. It's about refusing to give up, even when victory seems impossible. Sounds like a wise man, Anakin said quietly. My mother used to say something similar. She told me no one is truly free if someone else is enslaved. That even one person's suffering mattered. His mechanical hand clenched unconsciously. She was a slave on Tatooine. The Jedi freed me, but they left her behind. For 9 years, I trained to be this great Jedi Knight while she served a moisture farmer in the Outer Rim. Superman heard the pain in those words, old grief mixed with newer guilt. He asked gently. Tusken Raiders captured her. Tortured her for a month before I found her. Anakin's voice had gone flat, emotionless in the way people sound when discussing trauma they haven't processed. She died in my arms. And he stopped, jaw clenching. Superman didn't need superhearing to understand what Anakin wasn't saying. The young Jedi had done something in response to his mother's death, something that haunted him still. I'm sorry, Superman said simply. Losing a parent there's no right way to handle it. No correct response. You just survive it and hope you can honor their memory by becoming someone they'd be proud of. Anakin looked at him sharply, searching for judgment and finding only empathy. The Jedi teach that attachments lead to the dark side. That we're supposed to love everyone equally and no one specifically. But when she died, I didn't feel equal love for the galaxy. I felt rage. Pure, burning rage. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. And for a few minutes, I let that rage control me. I became exactly what the Council fears. And then? Superman prompted. And then I stopped, Anakin said. I chose to stop. But the Jedi don't see it that way. They see someone who touched the dark side. Someone who can't be fully trusted. Someone who needs to be watched constantly in case he falls. Bitterness crept into his tone. Master Obi-Wan tries to hide it, but I can sense his concern. Master Windu barely tolerates me. Even Master Yoda looks at me sometimes like I'm a bomb that might explode. Superman understood that feeling intimately, the weight of being seen as a potential threat by people who should be allies. Back home, a friend of mine, Batman, keeps a piece of kryptonite in a lead-lined pouch. Just in case I ever go rogue, lose control, or get mind-controlled by some villain. It used to make me angry. Now I understand it's just pragmatism. He's not my enemy. He's my friend being responsible. That doesn't bother you? Anakin asked incredulously. It bothers me that it's necessary, Superman clarified. But I'd rather have people who care enough to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best than people who blindly trust and can't stop me if I genuinely become a threat. He met Anakin's gaze directly. You touched the dark side and chose to step back. That's not weakness, Anakin. That's the hardest kind of strength, the strength to stop when every instinct screams to keep going. Anakin stared at him for a long moment, then looked away, blinking rapidly. The Council sent me here to evaluate you. To see if you're trustworthy. To report back on your intentions. He laughed without humor. Guess they figured the guy they don't fully trust would be a good judge of the guy they can't read at all. Or maybe, Superman suggested, they figured two people struggling with similar burdens might understand each other better than any master and student relationship could manage. Before Anakin could respond, both men turned simultaneously toward the window. Superman's superhearing had caught it first, the distinctive scream of emergency repulsor engines failing. Anakin sensed it through the Force a millisecond later, a spike of terror from hundreds of minds facing imminent death. 3 kilometers away, a public transport vessel carrying 600 civilians had suffered catastrophic engine failure. It was dropping out of the sky lanes, plummeting toward the industrial district below where the impact would ignite chemical storage facilities and kill thousands more. 30 seconds until impact. Superman moved toward the window, prepared to shatter through if necessary. Anakin's hand caught his shoulder, not restraining, just contact. Wait. I'm coming with you. You can fly? Superman asked, genuinely surprised. Not naturally. But I'm the best pilot in the Jedi Order. Anakin's grin was fierce and confident. There's a landing platform 2 levels down with temple speeders. We can. No time, Superman interrupted. He could hear children crying in that falling transport, parents trying to comfort them in their final moments, pilots desperately attempting emergency protocols that wouldn't work. Hold on to me. What? Superman grabbed Anakin around the waist with one arm, kicked off from the floor, and exploded through the transparent steel window in a shower of glittering fragments. Anakin had exactly half a second to process what was happening before they were airborne, accelerating toward the falling transport at speeds that would have torn a normal human apart from wind resistance alone. Force. Anakin shouted over the rushing air, his voice equal parts terror and exhilaration. You can actually fly. Molecular manipulation of gravitational fields. Superman shouted back, his cape streaming behind them like a red comet's tail. I don't have time to explain the physics. The transport loomed ahead, a massive durasteel cylinder tumbling end over end. 20 seconds to impact. Superman adjusted his trajectory, calculating vectors with the superhuman processing speed that let him play chess against supercomputers. He couldn't catch it from below, the momentum would drive them both into the ground. Couldn't grab it from the side, his grip would tear through the hull and decompress the passenger compartment. Had to match velocity. Had to become part of its fall. Then redirect. Anakin. Superman called as they closed the distance. Can you use your force abilities to stabilize the rotation? I can try. The young Jedi extended both hands, his face contorting with concentration. Through the force, he reached out to the massive vessel, pressing against its tumbling trajectory with telekinetic strength honed through years of training. The transport's wild spin began to slow, its descent becoming more controlled. 10 seconds. Superman released Anakin, who immediately used the force to hover himself in midair, and dove beneath the transport. He pressed both hands against its undercarriage, feeling the incredible weight and momentum pressing down on him. This was heavier than anything he'd moved since arriving in this galaxy. Heavier than he should be able to handle at 90% capacity. But 600 lives depended on him being wrong about his limitations. 5 seconds. Superman gritted his teeth and pushed. Not just with his muscles, though those strained with effort that made his vision blur, but with every ounce of determination that had let him move planets, stop asteroids, and hold black holes open long enough for teammates to escape. The transport's descent began to slow, repulsor energy from Superman's cellular structure bleeding into the atmosphere around them, creating a corona of golden light. 3 seconds. The chemical storage facilities rushed up to meet them, massive tanks filled with Tabana gas and hypermatter fuel, enough explosive power to level half the district. 2 seconds. Not today, Superman growled, and pushed. The transport stopped 3 meters above the storage facility's roof. Hung suspended in the air for one impossible moment. Then, with Superman guiding it like a parent lowering a sleeping child into a crib, settled gently onto the reinforced landing pad adjacent to the facility. Inside, 600 passengers sat in stunned silence. Then, slowly, cheering began. Superman lowered himself to the landing pad, his legs shaky from the exertion. His cells were screaming for more solar energy, his reserves depleted in a way they hadn't been since fighting Darkseid. But everyone was alive. That made any cost worthwhile. Anakin touched down beside him, lightsaber in hand, scanning for threats. That was. He shook his head, grinning like a child who'd just ridden the galaxy's most intense roller coaster. That was the most insane thing I've ever seen, and I've fought in space battles while hanging off the wing of a starfighter. The transport's emergency doors opened, and passengers began streaming out. Families clutching each other. Elderly couples helping one another walk. Children staring wide-eyed at the man in the colorful suit who'd just saved their lives. A Twi'lek mother approached, her twin children hiding behind her legs. "Thank you," she said in heavily accented basic, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Superman knelt so he was at eye level with the children, a gesture that had always helped scared kids back on Earth. "You're safe now," he said gently. "The scary part's over." One of the children, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, stepped forward and touched the S symbol on his chest with one small finger. "Are you a Jedi?" she asked. "No," Superman replied with a soft smile. "Just someone who was in the right place at the right time." "Liar," Anakin said, but his voice was warm with respect. "Jedi or not, that was a Jedi move if I've ever seen one. Reckless, heroic, and completely impossible." He extended his hand to help Superman stand. "The Council's going to have a lot to say about you breaking temple windows and unauthorized rescue operations." Superman accepted the help, rising to his full height. Around them, emergency response vehicles were arriving, Republic security, fire suppression teams, medical personnel. The organized chaos of a catastrophe averted. Let them say what they want. I made a promise when I put on this suit. If I can help someone, I do. No committee approval required. Anakin's grin widened. "Yeah. You and I are going to get along just fine." As they waited for temple transport to retrieve them, Superman looked up at Coruscant's darkening sky. Somewhere in this vast galaxy, the Sith Lords Obi-Wan had mentioned were plotting. A war was consuming countless lives. And he was trapped far from home, unable to protect the people he'd sworn to defend. But here, now, 600 people were alive who should have been dead. Children would go home to their families. Parents would tuck their kids into bed. Tomorrow would come for people who'd been seconds from oblivion. His father had been right. The symbol wasn't about saving everyone. It was about trying. About refusing to accept that some tragedies were inevitable. And in a galaxy at war, torn by conflict he barely understood, that simple philosophy might matter more than ever. In the shadows of the industrial district, a hooded figure observed the scene through electrobinoculars. The being lowered the device, considering what he'd witnessed. This, Superman, represented a significant variable, one Lord Tyrannus would want to know about immediately. The figure activated a secure holographic communicator. When Count Dooku's image materialized, the observer spoke with professional detachment. "My lord, you asked to be informed of any unusual force phenomena. I may have found something even more unusual, a phenomenon that exists entirely outside the force." Dooku's holographic eyes narrowed with interest. "Tell me everything." Count Dooku's private meditation chamber aboard his Providence-class dreadnought existed in a state of carefully curated darkness. No viewport disturbed the absolute blackness. No illumination except the faint crimson glow of a Sith holocron hovering at the room's center, casting shadows that seemed to writhe with malevolent sentience. Here, the former Jedi Master, now Darth Tyrannus, apprentice to Darth Sidious, contemplated the nature of power and the galaxy's inevitable transformation. The holographic report from his Coruscant operative played for the third time, projected in the air before him. Security footage showed a figure in blue and red catching a falling transport vessel with his bare hands, defying physics, gravity, and every known limitation of organic biology. No force signature. No energy readings consistent with repulsor technology. Just impossible strength wielded with disturbing ease. Dooku stroked his elegant beard, his aristocratic features arranged in an expression of fascinated contemplation. In his 7 decades of life, first as a Jedi, now as a Sith, he had encountered many unusual phenomena. Force-sensitive species with exotic abilities. Ancient Sith artifacts that defied rational explanation. Even the mysterious nature of his own master, whose true identity remained hidden behind layers of political theater. But this? This was genuinely novel. "Lord Tyrannus," General Grievous' synthesized voice rasped from the chamber's entrance. The cyborg general stood in the doorway, his cape draped across his mechanical shoulders, for arms folded in an approximation of military parade rest. "You summon me?" "Indeed." Dooku gestured, and the hologram shifted to display Superman's image frozen in mid-flight, Anakin Skywalker clutched in one arm. "Tell me, General, in your extensive military experience, have you encountered any species capable of such feats without technological augmentation?" Grievous optical sensors zoomed in, processing the image with cybernetic precision. His breathing apparatus wheezed, a sound that had terrorized 1,000 battlefields. No biological organism should possess such capabilities. Even Wookiees, with their legendary strength, could not arrest the momentum of a falling transport. The G-forces alone would pulverize bone structure. His vocabulator crackled with something approximating interest. "What is this creature?" "That," Dooku replied, "is an excellent question. My operative reports that the Jedi Council held an emergency session regarding this individual. He arrived on Coruscant yesterday through unknown means, possibly an interdimensional phenomenon that our sensors couldn't detect. The Jedi claim he exists outside the Force entirely." Grievous' mechanical laugh sounded like metal scraping across stone. "The Jedi claim many things. Usually to justify their failures." "True," Dooku acknowledged. "But in this case, I'm inclined to believe them. Watch." He replayed the footage, slowing it down to 1/10 speed. "Notice how he moves. No force precognition guiding his trajectory. No telekinetic assist reducing the transport's weight. Pure physical strength and calculated precision. He's operating on sensory input and reflex alone, yet his performance exceeds what even Master Yoda could accomplish with the full power of the Force behind him." The cyborg general leaned closer, his facial plates arranged in what might have been a frown. "A weapon, then. One the Republic is developing to counter our superior droid armies." "Perhaps," Dooku mused. "Or perhaps something neither we nor the Republic anticipated. My master has been unusually silent regarding this development. When I informed him of the situation, he instructed me to observe, evaluate, and report, but not to engage." The Sith Lord's tone carried a hint of frustration that he immediately suppressed. Questioning Sidious, even internally, was dangerous. This suggests he either knows more than he's revealing, or he's as surprised as we are. Grievous straightened to his full imposing height. "Then we should capture this creature. Study him. Determine if his abilities can be replicated or exploited. The Separatist Council would pay handsomely for technology that could create soldiers with such capabilities." "An admirable thought, General. But premature." Dooku deactivated the hologram, plunging the chamber into near-total darkness relieved only by the holocron's crimson glow. "This being, they're calling him Superman. I'm told, demonstrated not just power, but moral conviction. He saved 600 civilians who meant nothing to him personally. That suggests exploitable psychology." "You intend to turn him," Grievous stated flatly. "I intend to offer him a choice." Dooku's voice carried the smooth persuasiveness that had convinced entire star systems to abandon the Republic. "The Jedi will try to control him, contain him, make him a weapon in their unjust war. We, however, can offer something more appealing, freedom to use his abilities as his conscience dictates. No council oversight. No bureaucratic restrictions. Just power in service to order." Grievous optical sensors flashed skeptically. "And if he refuses? Then we reassess." Dooku smiled thinly. "But first, we must understand him. His capabilities, certainly, but more importantly his motivations. What drives a being of such power to intervene in the affairs of strangers? What principles guide him? What does he value enough to fight for?" The Sith Lord's expression hardened. "And what would he be willing to do to protect those values?" The holocron pulsed, casting dancing shadows across Dooku's aristocratic features. Through the Force, he could sense his master's presence across the vast distance separating them, a cold, calculating attention focused on this same problem. Sidious's grand design had been 3 decades in the making. Every move choreographed. Every outcome predicted. The Clone Wars were proceeding exactly according to plan, grinding the Jedi Order down while consolidating Palpatine's emergency powers. But this Superman represented chaos. An uncontrolled variable. A piece on the board that hadn't been there when the game began. "Prepare a stealth ship," Dooku commanded. "I will travel to Coruscant personally. Not to engage, merely to observe. To understand." He turned his gaze back to where the hologram had displayed Superman's impossible rescue. And perhaps to extend an invitation to a being who may not yet realize that the heroes he's aligned himself with are fighting for a corrupt, dying system that deserves its fate. Grievous bowed slightly, respect mixed with barely concealed bloodlust. "As you command, Lord Tyrannus. Though I still believe a more direct approach would be efficient." "Efficiency has its place, General. But sometimes, the subtle blade cuts deeper than the obvious one." Dooku dismissed him with a gesture. "That will be all. Inform me when the ship is ready." After Grievous departed, his mechanical footsteps echoing through the dreadnought's corridors, Dooku stood alone in the darkness with only the Sith holocron for company. He extended his hand, letting dark side energy crackle across his fingertips, power earned through decades of study, refined through passion and conviction that the Jedi Order's dogma had failed the galaxy. Could Force lightning harm this Superman? Traditional lightsaber combat would be ineffective against invulnerable skin. Telekinesis might slow him but probably couldn't stop him. And if he truly existed outside the Force's influence, then Sith mind tricks and battle meditation would slide off him like rain from Durasteel. Which meant victory, if it came to that, would require strategy rather than raw power. Required understanding the enemy's psychology and exploiting weaknesses that weren't physical. Dooku had toppled governments that way. Had turned Jedi to the dark side through carefully constructed arguments about the Republic's failures. Had built the Separatist alliance by offering disenfranchised systems exactly what they wanted to hear. One idealistic alien with godlike powers. That was merely another puzzle to solve. Across the galaxy, in an elegantly appointed office beneath the Senate building, Chancellor Palpatine stared at the same footage Count Dooku had reviewed. But where his apprentice saw an opportunity, the Sith Master saw a threat of staggering proportions. His plan, the culmination of 1,000 years of Sith preparation, balanced on a knife's edge. The Clone Wars were designed to create the perfect conditions for transformation, a republic so desperate for security that it would embrace authoritarian control, a Jedi Order so exhausted and compromised that its destruction would seem necessary, clone troopers programmed with contingency orders that would ensure no Jedi survived the coming purge. Every variable accounted for. Every outcome predicted. The Force itself bent to his will through decades of patient manipulation. And now this. Palpatine's yellow eyes, hidden behind holographic projections that made him appear as the kindly Chancellor the Senate knew, narrowed as he watched Superman catch the transport. The power on display would have required a dozen Jedi working in perfect coordination. This being had done it alone, casually, while operating at reduced capacity according to the temple's medical scans. Lord Sidious. Mas Amedda, his Chagrian aide, entered with the cautious deference of someone who'd learned never to startle his employer. The Senate session regarding the new clone trooper appropriations bill begins in 1 hour. Reschedule it, Palpatine said without turning. Tell the senators I've taken ill. Nothing serious, merely fatigue from long hours managing the war effort. Amedda hesitated. The Chancellor never missed Senate sessions, especially ones critical to his plans. My lord, if I may, the Loyalist Committee has been pressing for this vote. Delaying could create political complications. Then let there be complications. Palpatine finally turned, and for just a moment, the holographic disguise flickered, revealing the true face beneath, ancient, scarred by dark side corruption, eyes burning with malevolent intelligence. I have more pressing concerns than senators and their tedious debates. After his aide departed, Palpatine activated a secure holographic communicator. Dooku's image materialized, kneeling in a posture of subservience that had become automatic over the years of their partnership. "Master," Dooku said. "You've seen the footage," Palpatine stated rather than asked. "I have. I intend to approach him personally. To determine if he can be turned or if more permanent solutions are required." "No," the word cracked like a whip. "You will observe only. No direct contact. No engagement." This being represents a variable I did not foresee, which should be impossible given the extent of my visions. That alone makes him extraordinarily dangerous. Dooku's holographic image shifted slightly, the body language of a student questioning a master's judgment. "With respect, my lord, if he can be converted to our cause. Then he becomes a weapon I cannot fully control," Palpatine interrupted. "Consider, my apprentice, he exists outside the Force. My ability to predict his actions, to manipulate his choices, to ensure his loyalty, all of that depends on connections I cannot establish. He would be a servant I could neither reward through dark side power nor punish through its withdrawal." His tone hardened. "The Sith control through fear, through desire, through the promise of strength. What do we offer a being who already possesses absolute strength?" The question hung in the air between them. Dooku, for all his intelligence and political acumen, had no answer. "Observe him," Palpatine continued. "Learn his weaknesses, not physical, but psychological. Everyone wants something. Everyone fears something. Find those pressure points. But do not engage directly. Not yet. Not until I understand how his presence affects the larger design. As you command, Master." The hologram deactivated, leaving Palpatine alone with his thoughts and the city planet's endless light pollution visible through his office windows. For the first time in decades, Darth Sidious felt something he'd almost forgotten: uncertainty. His plan had always accounted for the unexpected: Jedi prodigies like Skywalker, military geniuses like the clone commanders, even potential rivals among the separatist leadership. But those were all variables operating within the Force's framework. Players on a board he could see entirely from above. Superman was a piece from a different game entirely, dropped onto his carefully arranged board without warning. And in the shadows of Palpatine's mind, a whisper of possibility emerged, not a vision granted by the Force, but a logical extrapolation based on observed facts. If this Superman truly came from another reality, if interdimensional travel was possible even through accident, then what else might cross between universes? What other powers, what other threats, what other opportunities? The Sith had spent millennia preparing to rule this galaxy. The thought of realities beyond their current one, full of beings with abilities that bypassed the Force entirely, was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Perhaps, Palpatine thought, this wasn't a threat to his plan. Perhaps it was the universe itself offering him an opportunity to think bigger. To consider conquest not just of this galaxy, but of... No. That was ambition overriding strategic thinking. First, survive the present crisis. Understand this Superman. Determine if he accelerated or disrupted the timeline. Then, once the Empire was established and the Jedi were extinct, there would be time to explore what other realities might offer. Palpatine allowed himself a thin smile. After all, he'd waited this long to claim his destiny. What was a little longer to account for variables that existed beyond the Force itself? Back at the Jedi Temple, Superman stood in a training room watching Anakin demonstrate lightsaber forms against a series of remote droids. The young Jedi moved with fluid grace, his blades singing through the air in patterns that seemed almost choreographed. Each strike flowed into the next. Each deflection of a training bolt set up the subsequent attack. It was beautiful, martial artistry refined over millennia into something approaching perfection. "Your turn," Anakin called, deactivating his lightsaber and tossing it to Superman. Superman caught it reflexively, feeling the weapon's weight, surprisingly light, almost all the mass concentrated in the hilt. "I don't think that's a good idea." Why not? Worried you'll break it? Anakin grinned. These things are built to withstand starship hull impacts. I think they can survive Superman. It's not the lightsaber I'm worried about. Superman activated the blade, a pure blue beam of plasma extending with a distinctive snap hiss. The weapon hummed in his hand, unstable, alive with contained energy. I've never used a sword. I could hurt someone. That's what the training remotes are for. Anakin gestured, and 6 spherical droids rose from charging ports around the room, spreading out in a defensive perimeter. Don't overthink it. Just react. Your reflexes are obviously incredible, use them. Superman took a practice swing, feeling the blade's weightlessness. The gyroscopic effect was disorienting, all the momentum seemed to exist in the hilt, while the blade itself had no mass at all. This is going to go badly. Probably, Anakin agreed cheerfully. Begin training sequence. The remotes opened fire, low-power stun bolts that would sting but not seriously harm. Superman's enhanced reflexes kicked in automatically, his body twisting to avoid the first salvo. But avoidance wasn't the point of this exercise. He brought the lightsaber up in what he thought was a defensive position, trying to intercept a bolt the way Anakin had. The blade connected with the energy blast and deflected it perfectly, straight into the ceiling, where it scorched a dark mark on the reinforced plating. Better than my first time. Anakin called. I accidentally deflected one into Master Windu's robes. He was not amused. Superman tried again, this time attempting to direct the deflection consciously. The bolt ricocheted toward one of the remotes, missing by a meter but close enough to demonstrate progress. His third attempt actually hit the target, deactivating the remote in a shower of sparks. See? Anakin moved to stand beside him, his own lightsaber igniting with emerald brilliance. You're a natural. Most people train for years before they can reliably deflect blaster fire. You're doing it after 5 minutes. I'm cheating, Superman admitted, deflecting another bolt, this one intentionally directed into the floor to avoid collateral damage. My eyes can track the bolt's trajectory from the moment it leaves the emitter. I'm seeing it in slow motion and calculating angles before it even reaches me. It's not skill. It's just processing speed. And a Jedi uses the Force to see attacks before they happen, Anakin countered, destroying 2 remotes with casual precision. Different methods, same result. Combat is about using whatever advantages you have. He executed a spinning strike that took out 3 remotes simultaneously, his movements flowing like water. The Jedi Council would tell you that technique matters, that form and discipline are everything. But I've found that winning matters more than looking pretty while you do it. Superman deactivated his borrowed lightsaber, handing it back to Anakin. Master Yoda wouldn't approve of that philosophy. Master Yoda wouldn't approve of half the things I do. Anakin's tone was light, but Superman heard the undercurrent of frustration. The Council expects Jedi to be monks who coincidentally happen to fight wars. No attachments. No passion. No personal desires beyond serving the Force. It's an impossible standard, and they know it. But you try anyway. What else can I do? Anakin deactivated his lightsaber, hanging it back on his belt. I believe in what the Jedi stand for, protecting the innocent, maintaining peace, using power responsibly. I just don't believe that means cutting yourself off from everything that makes life worth living. He looked at Superman directly. You said you have people back home. People you care about. Would you give them up if someone told you attachment made you weaker? Superman thought of Lois, brilliant, fearless Lois Lane who'd figured out his secret identity through pure investigative tenacity. Thought of his parents, both sets, who'd shaped him into the man he'd become. Thought of the Justice League, friends and colleagues who'd fought beside him against impossible odds. No, he said simply. They make me stronger. They give me reasons to be better than I am. Exactly. Anakin's expression was a mixture of vindication and melancholy. But the Jedi don't see it that way. To them, love is just attachment waiting to become possessiveness. Fear of loss waiting to become rage. They're so afraid of the dark side that they've forbidden everything that makes us human. He caught himself. Or Togruta, or Keldor, or whatever species. You know what I mean. Superman did know. He'd had similar conversations with Batman, who'd lost his parents and built a life around that loss. With Wonder Woman, who'd left her home to protect a world that often feared her. With every hero who'd ever struggled to balance personal happiness against the responsibility that came with power. There has to be a middle path, Superman said. Between total detachment and destructive attachment. Between denying emotion and being controlled by it. If you find it, let me know. Anakin's smile was bitter. The Council certainly hasn't. Master Obi-Wan comes closest, he bends the rules, interprets doctrine flexibly, cares about people as individuals rather than just force-sensitive resources. But even he tells me I need to let go of things I can't control. Let go of anger over my mother's death. Let go of, he stopped abruptly. Let go of what? Superman prompted gently. Anakin was quiet for a long moment, clearly debating how much to share. Finally, there's someone. A senator. We knew each other as children, before I became a Jedi. She believes in democracy, in justice, in everything the Republic is supposed to stand for. And he shook his head. It doesn't matter. The code forbids it. And even if it didn't, a Jedi's life is war and sacrifice. What kind of future could I offer her? Superman recognized the tone, self-denial wrapped around desperate longing. He'd heard it in his own voice 1,000 times before finally telling Lois the truth. Have you asked her what she wants? Maybe she'd rather have whatever future you could share than no future at all. It's not that simple. It never is, Superman agreed. But speaking from experience, secrets and self-sacrifice make terrible foundations for relationships. Trust is built on honesty, even when honesty is terrifying. Before Anakin could respond, the training room's door slid open. Master Obi-Wan Kenobi entered, his robes still dusty from travel, his expression tired but alert. Behind his beard, Superman could see the stress lines of someone carrying too much responsibility with too few resources. Anakin, Obi-Wan said, his cultured Coruscanti accent making even simple greetings sound elegant. And our mysterious visitor. I apologize for not meeting you sooner, Superman. Command responsibilities kept me at the front lines longer than anticipated. No apology necessary, Superman replied. You're fighting a war. That takes precedence over diplomatic niceties. Obi-Wan's expression flickered with something, surprise, perhaps, that someone understood the crushing weight of military leadership. Yes, well. The Council has asked me to brief you on the current strategic situation. If you're going to remain on Coruscant, even temporarily, you should understand what you've walked into. He gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the room, a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with red zones indicating separatist control, blue showing Republic territory, and purple marking contested systems. The purple zones vastly outnumbered the clearly controlled regions. This is the galaxy at war, Obi-Wan said, his voice taking on the lecturing tone of an experienced teacher. 3 years ago, thousands of star systems voted to secede from the Republic, forming the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Their grievances were legitimate: Republic taxation, bureaucratic corruption, core world favoritism over Outer Rim territories. But their solution was violent revolution. Superman studied the map, his reporter's instincts cataloging patterns. The separatist systems form a crescent along the Outer Rim. Strategic positioning to cut off Republic supply lines. Precisely, Obi-Wan confirmed, clearly impressed. Led by Count Dooku, a former Jedi Master, the Confederacy has assembled the largest droid army in galactic history. Battle droids that don't eat, don't sleep, don't question orders. They can be manufactured faster than we can train clone troopers, and they fight with suicidal determination because they're programmed to. Anakin's hand clenched unconsciously. We're losing ground every day. For every system we liberate, they take 2 more. The Senate keeps voting for more clone production, more warship construction, more emergency powers for the Chancellor. But it's never enough. And the Jedi's role in this? Superman asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. We're generals now, Obi-Wan said quietly, and Superman heard the shame beneath the admission. Commanders of clone armies, strategists planning planetary invasions, warriors instead of peacekeepers. The Council debates whether we've betrayed our principles, but what choice did we have? The Republic was defenseless. The Jedi Order has always served the Republic. When it called for help, we answered. Superman understood that reasoning. Understood how easy it was to compromise principles when lives hung in the balance. How the slope from, just this once, to, this is who we are now, could be traversed in increments so small you didn't notice until you looked back and couldn't recognize yourself. Who's winning? He asked. The 2 Jedi exchanged glances. Neither of us, Anakin said finally. That's the problem. It's a stalemate. We win battles but can't win the war. They lose territory but always have reinforcements. It's like fighting a hydra, cut off one head, 2 more grow back. Obi-Wan manipulated the hologram, zooming in on specific systems. And then there are the Sith. Count Dooku is Darth Tyrannus, apprentice to a Sith Lord we've only encountered through hologram, Darth Sidious. Traditional Sith doctrine holds that there are only ever 2, a master and an apprentice. But their influence extends far beyond just those 2 individuals. You're fighting a war on multiple fronts, Superman observed. The military conflict against the Separatists, the shadow war against Sith manipulation, and a political battle to preserve the Republic's democratic values against increasing authoritarianism. He looked at Obi-Wan directly. And you're not sure you can win any of them. The Jedi Master's shoulders sagged slightly, a moment of vulnerability from someone who usually projected unshakable confidence. No, he admitted. We're not. Which is why your arrival has created such intense interest. The Council sees you as either a potential asset that could shift the balance or a wild card that could make everything worse. And what do you see? Superman asked. Obi-Wan studied him for a long moment, his Force-sensitive perception reading body language and micro-expressions even without access to Superman's thoughts. I see someone who saved 600 civilians without hesitation. Someone who asked about his responsibilities before asserting his rights. Someone who, he glanced at Anakin with a slight smile, seems to bring out my former Padawan's better instincts rather than his more reckless ones. Hey, Anakin protested, but he was grinning. I also see, Obi-Wan continued, his tone becoming more serious, someone powerful enough to change the war's outcome through sheer force. And that terrifies me, Superman. Because wars aren't won by power alone. They're won by strategy, sacrifice, and moral clarity. And in a conflict this complex, I'm not sure any of us have the moral clarity necessary to justify the weapons we're using. Superman appreciated the honesty, the willingness to acknowledge doubt rather than hide behind certainty. I'm not a weapon, he said firmly. I'm a person. And I don't take orders from military commanders or government officials just because they claim authority. I act according to my conscience, shaped by the values my parents taught me. Which are? Obi-Wan prompted. That every life matters. That power without compassion is tyranny. That the strong protect the weak not because they're ordered to, but because it's the right thing to do. Superman's voice carried absolute conviction. And that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to fight, even when everyone expects you to. The holographic galaxy rotated slowly between them, its billions of stars representing trillions of lives caught in a conflict none of them had chosen. Anakin stared at it with the intensity of someone who'd lost friends to the war and would lose more before it ended. Obi-Wan watched it with the weariness of someone who knew that military victory wouldn't solve the deeper problems tearing the Republic apart. And Superman looked at it with the perspective of someone from outside this galaxy entirely, someone who could see patterns the natives had become too close to recognize. This war serves someone, he said slowly, the investigative journalist in him assembling pieces. You said there's a hidden Sith Master. Count Dooku leads the Separatists but answers to this Sidious. The Republic grows more authoritarian to fight the threat, and the Chancellor accumulates emergency powers. His eyes narrowed. What happens to those emergency powers when the war ends? Obi-Wan and Anakin looked at each other, and Superman saw the answer in their expressions. They'd considered this question. Had worried about it during long nights between battles. But they hadn't found a solution that didn't involve either losing the war or betraying their oaths to defend the Republic. We'll deal with that problem when we get there, Anakin said, but his voice lacked conviction. What if you never get there? Superman pressed. What if this war is designed to never end? Or to end only when democracy has been so thoroughly dismantled that victory is indistinguishable from defeat? The silence that followed was heavy with implications neither Jedi wanted to voice. Finally, Obi-Wan spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, then we've already lost. In that moment, Superman understood exactly why his arrival had caused such turmoil in the Jedi Council. They weren't afraid of his power. They were afraid he might ask questions they'd been avoiding. Might force them to confront truths they'd buried beneath duty and desperation. Might show them that the war they were fighting, with all its casualties and compromises, was exactly what their hidden enemy wanted. And if that was true, then every victory they achieved was just another step toward defeat. The Republic fleet emerged from hyperspace above Christophsis with the organized chaos of a military operation launched on compressed timelines. 6 Venator-class star destroyers, 3 dozen support frigates, and a complement of starfighters that glittered like metallic insects against the planet's crystalline surface. Christophsis, a world of towering crystal formations that refracted light into rainbow cascades, had become a strategic choke point in the war's latest campaign. Whoever controlled its hyperspace lanes controlled access to 3 adjacent sectors. The Separatists had controlled it for 6 months. Today, the Republic intended to take it back. Superman stood on the bridge of the lead Venator, his cape somehow managing to billow despite the artificial gravity and recycled air. Around him, clone troopers moved with synchronized efficiency, their white armor making them appear identical until you learn to recognize the subtle personalization, paint schemes, modified helmets, the way individual soldiers carried themselves. These weren't droids following programming. They were men who'd chosen names, developed personalities, forged friendships in the crucible of combat. Men created to be disposable who decided they were worth more than that. All squadrons report ready, Admiral Wolf Yularen announced from his command station. The career officer carried himself with the rigid professionalism of someone who'd served the Republic before the war and intended to serve it after, assuming there was an after. General Skywalker, we're in position to begin the orbital bombardment. Anakin stood at the tactical display, his Jedi robes exchanged for practical combat gear that still somehow looked dramatic. Obi-Wan stood beside him, one hand resting on his lightsaber hilt, his expression settled into the calm focus of a man who'd fought too many battles to get nervous before them anymore. Negative on the bombardment, Anakin said, surprising exactly no one who'd worked with him before. There are civilian population centers mixed in with the separatist positions. We're not leveling cities just to make our job easier. General Skywalker, Captain Rex, distinguished by the blue markings on his armor and the presence in his voice that suggested authority earned rather than programmed, approached from the starboard side. Our intel suggests minimal droid presence in the capital. They've concentrated forces at the primary spaceport. If we can secure that, we cut off their reinforcement capabilities. Which is exactly what they'll expect us to try, Obi-Wan observed, stroking his beard thoughtfully. Count Dooku didn't hold this planet for 6 months by being predictable. There will be a trap. Then we spring it carefully, Anakin replied, his tactical mind already 3 moves ahead. We send in a diversionary force to the spaceport, enough to make them think it's our main assault. Meanwhile, gunships deploy troops directly into the capital. We secure the civilian centers, then use them as a staging ground for the actual offensive. Superman had been listening silently, his superhearing tracking conversations happening throughout the ship while his X-ray vision monitored the planet below. The Separatist positions were exactly where Republic intelligence suggested, mass droid formations around the spaceport, artillery emplacements in the Crystal Canyons, a command ship in low orbit on the planet's far side. But there was something else. Something the tactical displays weren't showing. There are energy readings in the lower city, Superman said quietly. Consistent with large-scale shield generators. And the droid formations at the spaceport aren't positioned defensively, they're positioned to funnel attackers into a kill zone. Every head on the bridge turned toward him. Admiral Yulleran's expression was skeptical. Our sensors show no shield generators in the lower city. And how would you know the droid's tactical positioning from this distance? Because I can see them, Superman replied simply. My vision can perceive electromagnetic spectrums beyond what your sensors detect. And I can visually identify individual droids from orbit. He gestured toward the tactical display. Your diversionary force won't draw them out. They'll let you land, activate the shields to prevent extraction, and then collapse the kill zone with artillery fire from the canyon positions. Obi-Wan's eyes narrowed. That's disturbingly specific intelligence. Are you certain? I'm looking at it right now. Anakin leaned forward, his expression shifting from skepticism to intense interest. Can you see their command structure? Identify which units are battle droids versus tactical droids. Superman focused, his vision drilling through layers of crystal, durasteel, and energy shielding. Tactical droids are concentrated in a reinforced bunker 3 kilometers northeast of the spaceport. Standard battle droids are deployed in defensive perimeters. But there's something else, a larger concentration in the Crystal Canyons. Heavier units. Possibly, he paused, recognizing the distinctive profile from briefings Obi-Wan had provided. Possibly a droideka squadron. At least 30 units. Captain Rex whistled low. Destroyer droids. That's enough firepower to shred our gunships before they even land. Not if they don't see us coming, Anakin said, his tactical instincts crystallizing into a plan. Superman, can you take out those destroyer droids before we begin our assault? Every officer on the bridge went still. Admiral Yulleran looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. Obi-Wan's hand tightened on his lightsaber. The clone troopers exchanged glances that, even behind their helmets, conveyed extreme skepticism. General Skywalker, Yulleran said carefully, are you suggesting we deploy an unaffiliated combatant as a solo advance force against one of the Separatists' most dangerous droid variants? I'm suggesting, Anakin replied with the confidence of youth backed by demonstrated competence, that we use every asset available. Superman can reach those positions faster than any shuttle. He's invulnerable to blaster fire, which means the droids can't hurt him. And if he eliminates the destroyer droids before they can engage our gunships, we save clone lives. It's not that simple, Obi-Wan interjected. Superman, you're not a soldier. You haven't trained with our forces. Coordination in combat requires shared protocols, communication standards, and familiarity with each other's capabilities. Inserting you as an independent operator creates variables we can't account for. Superman understood the concern. It was the same objection Batman had raised when Superman first joined the Justice League. Unpredictable teammates got people killed, no matter how powerful they were. But this situation was different. Those destroyer droids would kill clone troopers the moment Republic gunships came into range. Men with families, with dreams, with personalities they developed despite being grown in vats and programmed for war. Men who deserved better than being sacrificed because the alternative was tactically complicated. I'm not asking to lead the assault, Superman said. I'm volunteering to remove one specific threat before your troops are exposed to it. I'll neutralize the destroyer droids, then withdraw and let your forces handle the rest. No heroics. No improvisation. Just eliminate a known threat and get out of your way. Anakin looked at Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan looked at Admiral Yularen. The Admiral looked at Captain Rex. The chain of command engaged in silent communication that would have been impossible without years of working together. Finally, Rex spoke, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd watched too many brothers die in preventable ways. General Kenobi, with respect, we're about to send 3 gunships full of men into a situation where they'll be cut to pieces before they can disembark. If there's an option that doesn't involve that outcome, I say we take it. Seconded, another voice called from the crew pit. Then another. Within seconds, half the bridge crew was expressing support for the plan, their loyalty to the men in the gunships overriding their uncertainty about the strange being in the colorful suit. Obi-Wan sighed, recognizing when he'd been outmaneuvered by consensus. Very well. But Superman, his tone became firm, carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded armies, you follow our communications protocols exactly. Captain Rex will coordinate your approach. You strike the destroyer droids and withdraw immediately to designated extraction coordinates. No pursuing fleeing droids. No engaging additional targets. No attempts to win the battle single-handedly. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Superman confirmed, appreciating the trust being extended even as he understood the reservations behind it. Captain Rex, get him a comlink, Anakin ordered. And brief him on our tactical frequencies and identification codes. Last thing we need is our own forces shooting at him because they don't recognize him. Rex approached, removing a compact communicator from his belt. This is a standard Republic military comlink. Encrypted frequencies, voice-activated, with built-in friend or foe identification. He handed it to Superman, who studied the device with interest. You'll be on command frequency. General Skywalker, General Kenobi, myself, and Admiral Yularen will be able to hear you. And you'll hear us. Superman attached the comlink to his belt, testing the activation. How do I identify myself on your frequencies? Call sign, Rex paused, considering. How about Metropolis? Sound sufficiently distinctive. Superman's expression flickered, pain and homesickness mixed with appreciation for the gesture. Metropolis. The city he'd sworn to protect. The city that was now an impossible distance away, existing in a universe his current galaxy didn't even border. Metropolis works. Then let's begin, Obi-Wan said, his reluctance transformed into focused determination. Admiral Yularen, launch fighter screen and begin sensor sweeps to keep their attention divided. Anakin, coordinate with Gold Squadron for the diversionary approach to the spaceport. Captain Rex, prepare your men for combat drop once Superman has cleared the destroyer droid position. The bridge erupted into controlled activity. Officers called out status reports. Clone troopers moved to their stations with practiced efficiency. Starfighters launched from the Venator's belly hangars, forming defensive screens around the capital ships. And Superman walked to the airlock, preparing to do something he'd never attempted in his own universe, coordinate with a military force as a precision asset rather than an independent hero. Captain Rex accompanied him, his helmet tucked under one arm, revealing a face that was identical to every other clone's facial structure but somehow distinctly his through expression and bearing. I've lost a lot of brothers in this war, Rex said quietly as they waited for the airlock to cycle. Good men who deserve to grow old, to see the galaxy at peace, to live lives beyond war. If you can save some of them today, he extended his hand. Thank you. Superman clasped the offered hand, feeling the strength of a soldier who'd earned his men's loyalty through shared sacrifice. I'll do everything I can. That's all anyone can ask. Rex replaced his helmet, his voice now filtered through the speakers. Coordinates for the destroyer droid position are uploading to your comlink now. You'll have visual confirmation once you're below cloud cover. Our gunships will begin their approach 3 minutes after you engage. That gives you time to neutralize the threat and clear the landing zone. The airlock finished cycling. Beyond the transparent viewport, Christophsis rotated slowly, its crystal formations catching starlight and scattering it in prismatic glory. Beautiful from orbit. Deadly once you got close enough to see the weapon emplacements and droid armies. Superman stepped into the airlock's outer chamber. The door sealed behind him, atmospheric pressure equalizing in preparation for vacuum exposure. Metropolis, this is Skywalker, Anakin's voice crackled through the comlink. You're cleared for departure. May the Force be with you. Superman smiled slightly at the blessing offered to someone who existed outside the Force entirely. But he appreciated the sentiment. Thanks, General. See you on the ground. He triggered the airlock's exterior door. Vacuum rushed in, or rather, atmosphere rushed out, creating a brief whirlwind that would have killed any unprotected organism. Superman's Kryptonian physiology didn't even register the change. He'd fought in the void between planets, had flown through the corona of stars, had held his breath for hours when necessary. Space was uncomfortable. But it wasn't dangerous. He kicked off from the airlock's threshold, orienting himself toward Christophsis's crystalline surface. His body carved through the vacuum with impossible grace, cape somehow billowing despite the absence of air resistance. A visual effect his Kryptonian biology created through molecular manipulation that physicists in his own universe still couldn't explain. The planet rushed up to meet him. Superman angled his descent toward the coordinates Rex had provided, his vision tracking the destroyer droid formation through kilometers of crystal and stone. 30 units, arranged in defensive perimeter around a canyon that would provide perfect cover for their shield generators and repeating blasters. Droidekas were considered the Separatists' most dangerous infantry unit for good reason. Personal shields that could deflect lightsaber strikes. Twin blaster cannons capable of sustained fire rates that overwhelmed even Jedi reflexes. Mobility that let them roll into position as compact spheres before deploying into their distinctive tripod combat stance. Against conventional forces, even clone troopers, they were nearly unstoppable. Against a Kryptonian powered by twin suns and carrying the determination of someone who'd promised to save lives, they were about to have a very bad day. Superman hit Christophsis's upper atmosphere at speeds that generated a plasma sheath around his body, a meteor of blue, red, and gold screaming toward the surface. The planet's thin atmosphere couldn't slow him significantly. He adjusted his trajectory with minute muscle movements, threading between crystal spires that rose thousands of meters above the planet's surface. Metropolis to command, he transmitted as he descended. I have visual confirmation on the target zone. 30 destroyer droids in defensive formation, just as scanned. No additional hostile forces in immediate vicinity. Copy that, Metropolis, Captain Rex responded. You're cleared to engage. Gunship Gold Leader reports ready for approach on your signal. Superman dropped below the Crystal Canyon's rim, his speed creating sonic booms that shattered crystalline formations and sent shards tumbling into the valleys below. The destroyer droids registered his approach. Their sensors weren't sophisticated enough to identify what he was, but they recognized incoming threat and responded with programmed efficiency. 30 shield generators activated simultaneously, creating overlapping energy fields that could have withstood direct hits from Republic artillery. 60 blaster cannons swiveled toward his approach vector, their targeting computers calculating firing solutions with droid precision. They opened fire. The canyon lit up with sustained blaster fire, bolts of superheated plasma that could melt through armor plating, shields, reinforced bunkers. The destroyer droid's combined firepower was designed to eliminate entire infantry platoons in seconds. Superman flew straight through it. The plasma bolts splashed against his chest, his face, his outstretched hands, creating brilliant light shows but causing zero damage. His invulnerability, the same molecular density that let him survive nuclear explosions and punch through tank armor, rendered the droid's weapons completely ineffective. He reached the first destroyer droid formation at terminal velocity, grabbed 2 units by their central chassis, and simply crushed them. Metal shrieked. Circuit sparked. The droid's shield generators overloaded as Superman's grip exceeded their protection threshold by several orders of magnitude. 2 down, he reported calmly, already moving toward the next cluster. The destroyer droids recalculated, attempting to concentrate their fire on a single point to overwhelm his defenses through sustained damage. It was tactically sound reasoning. It would have worked against any other opponent. Superman was not any other opponent. He heat-visioned 4 droids simultaneously, his focused thermal beams cutting through their shields like they weren't there, melting their chassis into slag. Grabbed another 3 and threw them with enough force that they impacted the crystal canyon wall hard enough to shatter both the droids and the crystals. Used his freeze breath, a power that still felt strange in this galaxy's different atmosphere, to supercool 2 more units until their joints locked and their circuits froze. 15 seconds. 15 destroyer droids destroyed. The remaining units attempted to retreat, rolling back toward their command bunker where heavier defenses might stop this impossible threat. Superman pursued at super speed, his form a blue and red blur that covered the distance faster than their sensors could track. He landed among them like a meteor strike, the impact creating a crater that sent droids tumbling. Used his speed to dismantle 3 units before they could reorient. Crushed another 2. Heat visioned the final cluster until nothing remained but molten metal and sparking circuits. Metropolis to command, Superman transmitted, his breathing barely elevated despite the exertion. All destroyer droids neutralized. Landing zone is clear. No friendly casualties. No separatist reinforcements visible in my immediate scan range. The comlink crackled with dead silence for 3 full seconds. Then Captain Rex's voice, carrying barely suppressed awe, confirmed, Metropolis. Gunship Gold Leader, you are clear for approach. The landing zone is, unusually secure. Superman rose above the canyon rim, positioning himself to observe the Republic assault without interfering. Below, Republic gunships swooped in with practiced precision, clone troopers disembarking into the crystal canyons with weapons ready for resistance that no longer existed. Anakin's voice came through the comlink, and Superman could hear the grin, Metropolis, that was the most efficient destroyer droid elimination I've ever witnessed. And I once watched Master Windu take out 12 of them single-handedly. Just doing what needed to be done, Superman replied, watching the clone troopers secure the position with professional efficiency. No casualties. No desperate firefights. Just soldiers executing their mission because someone had cleared the deadliest obstacles before they arrived. This was what his power was for. Not glory or recognition, but giving people a chance to survive. To go home. To have futures beyond the next battle. From orbit, neither the Jedi nor the clone commanders could see Superman's expression as he watched the assault unfold. Couldn't see the weight that settled over him as he recognized a fundamental truth about this galaxy and this war. He could save these soldiers today. Could save hundreds more in battles across 1,000 worlds. But he couldn't save them from the war itself. Couldn't stop the grinding machinery that created clones to fight droids in conflicts orchestrated by hidden Sith Lords for purposes the Republic didn't understand. Military victory wasn't the answer. It was just a way to delay the real problems. And somewhere, in the shadows between stars, Count Dooku watched the battle through long-range scanners and smiled. The Jedi's new weapon had just demonstrated exactly what Darth Tyrannus needed to know: Superman could be pushed into military service through appeals to his protective instincts. Which meant he could be manipulated. Used. Turned. All Dooku needed was the right leverage and the right moment. The victory celebration on Christophsis lasted exactly as long as it took for the Republic to secure the spaceport and establish a garrison. 3 hours of coordinated military efficiency, casualty reports filed, equipment inventoried, defensive positions established, before the Venator-class Star Destroyers began preparations to jump to the next contested system. War didn't pause for reflection, and the Republic couldn't afford to consolidate victories when a dozen other worlds needed liberating. Superman stood in the Venator's observation deck, watching clone troopers load equipment onto transports bound for the surface. Each soldier moved with purpose, their identical armor personalization somehow making them more individual rather than less. Blue stripes for the 501st Legion. Tally marks indicating battle survived. Names stenciled in Orbesh that proclaimed their chosen identities: Fives, Echo, Jesse, Kix. Men who'd been created to be disposable choosing to matter anyway. "You're troubled," Obi-Wan's voice came from behind him, the Jedi Master's presence announced by the soft sound of boots on deck plating rather than any force warning Superman could perceive. "We won today. Minimal casualties. A strategic objective secured. Yet you look like someone who's just witnessed a tragedy." Superman didn't turn from the viewport. "How many clones did we save today by eliminating those destroyer droids?" "Captain Rex estimates between 40 and 60 lives," Obi-Wan replied, moving to stand beside him. "Based on typical engagement casualties against droidica formations. Your intervention was significant. And how many clones will die tomorrow? Next week? Next year?" Superman's reflection stared back at him from the transparisteel, the bright colors of his suit a jarring contrast to the military grays surrounding him. "I saved 60 men today so they could be sent to the next battle, and the next, until they're eventually killed by some droid or separatist weapon I wasn't there to stop." Obi-Wan was quiet for a long moment, his expression reflecting the weariness of someone who'd asked himself similar questions countless times. "War is a tragedy, Superman. Every life lost is irreplaceable. Every victory is purchased with sacrifice. We do what we can, save who we can, and try not to drown in the futility of it all. That's not good enough." Superman finally turned, and Obi-Wan saw something in his eyes that the Jedi Master recognized, the dangerous idealism of someone powerful enough to believe in solutions everyone else had dismissed as impossible. "This war is being orchestrated. You said it yourself, there's a Sith Lord hiding somewhere, manipulating events. What if instead of fighting symptoms, we eliminated the disease?" "You're suggesting we assassinate Darth Sidious," Obi-Wan said flatly. "Assuming we could even locate him, which we can't. The dark side clouds everything. Our most powerful Force users can't pierce the veil he's created." "I don't need the Force," Superman countered. "I need information. In my world, I was a reporter for a newspaper called the Daily Planet. I know how to investigate, how to connect patterns, how to find people who don't want to be found. Give me access to Republic intelligence databases, Senate communications, financial records." "Absolutely not." Mace Windu's voice cut through the conversation like a lightsaber through durasteel. The Jedi Master entered the observation deck with the controlled intensity that made him simultaneously the Council's greatest warrior and its most cautious strategist. "You want us to grant an unaffiliated alien access to classified Republic intelligence so you can conduct a vigilante investigation into one of the galaxy's most powerful Force users?" Superman met Windu's challenging stare without flinching. "I want to help end this war instead of just prolonging it. Every day it continues, more people die. More systems are devastated. More of the Republic's democratic principles erode under emergency powers that never get relinquished. If there's a chance, any chance, of finding Sidious and stopping this before it consumes the entire galaxy, isn't that worth exploring? At what cost?" Windu demanded, his hand not quite moving toward his lightsaber but the possibility implicit in his posture. "You've been in this galaxy for 3 days, Superman. 3 days. And you're already presuming to solve problems that the Jedi Order, with thousands of years of experience, hasn't been able to address." "Maybe that's exactly why I can help," Superman replied, keeping his voice level despite the frustration building in his chest. "Because I'm not bound by your traditions or limited by your assumptions. I can see this situation from the outside, without the biases that come from living inside it. Or with the dangerous ignorance that comes from not understanding our culture, our history, or our enemies." Windu stepped forward, and Superman noticed that Obi-Wan had subtly positioned himself between them, not defensively, but as a mediator prepared to intervene. The Sith are not common criminals you can track down with investigative journalism, Superman. They are masters of deception who have survived for millennia precisely because they cannot be found through conventional means. Then maybe it's time to try unconventional means, Superman shot back. Because your conventional approach is losing. Slowly, incrementally, but definitely losing. The observation deck's atmosphere had gone cold, tension crackling between Superman and Windu like static electricity before a lightning strike. Obi-Wan raised both hands in a placating gesture, his diplomatic instincts overriding his own complicated feelings about the debate. Gentlemen, perhaps we could. The ship's alarm klaxons screamed to life, cutting off whatever mediation Obi-Wan had prepared. Red emergency lighting flooded the corridors. Admiral Yularen's voice boomed through the ship-wide communications, all hands to battle stations. Separatist fleet emerging from hyperspace. All Jedi to the bridge immediately. Superman's superhearing had already identified the threat, massive energy signatures materializing in real space, the distinctive whine of droid starfighter engines launching, the electromagnetic chaos of weapon systems powering up. He was moving before the other Jedi could react, his superhuman speed carrying him through the corridors toward the bridge while Mace and Obi-Wan followed at merely human velocity. The bridge was controlled chaos when he arrived. Admiral Yularen stood at the tactical display, his professional composure barely masking the concern in his voice as he issued orders. All squadrons launch. Get those fighters in space now. Helm, bring us about to face the Providence class. Belay that order. Count Dooku's holographic image materialized at the bridge's center, life-sized and aristocratic, his elegant robes and cultured bearing somehow making his presence more threatening rather than less. Admiral Yularen, how pleasant to see you again. Still serving a corrupt republic that sends young men to die for outdated ideals, I see. Anakin stormed onto the bridge, lightsaber already in hand, his face twisted with rage that Superman recognized as deeply personal. Dooku. What are you doing here? Christophsis is ours now, you've lost this system. Lost? Dooku's holographic expression conveyed aristocratic amusement. My dear boy, I haven't lost anything. I've merely arranged a meeting with your new associate. His gaze shifted to Superman, and even through holographic projection, the intensity of that examination was palpable. The being who exists outside the Force. The impossible variable that has disrupted my master's calculations. I've been most curious to meet you, Superman. Superman stepped forward, positioning himself where the hologram could see him clearly. Every instinct honed by facing villains like Lex Luthor and Darkseid screamed that this was a trap, a manipulation, a play toward some hidden objective. But walking away from dangerous conversations had never been his style. Count Dooku, Superman replied evenly. I've heard about you. Former Jedi Master who turned to the dark side. Leader of the Separatist Alliance. Apprentice to Darth Sidious. He paused deliberately. Architect of a war that's killing millions while you pretend it's about legitimate grievances. Dooku's holographic eyebrow rose with what might have been genuine respect. Direct. I appreciate that. So few beings are willing to speak plainly anymore, everyone hides behind political niceties and diplomatic doublespeak. He gestured expansively, the motion somehow conveying both grace and threat. But you misunderstand my role, Superman. I didn't create this war. I merely recognized the Republic's corruption and provided an alternative for systems that had been exploited for millennia. By building a droid army and invading those same systems. Superman challenged. That's not liberation. That's conquest dressed in revolutionary rhetoric. And what the Republic does, sending clone slaves to die maintaining an empire that benefits core worlds at Outer Rim expense, that's justice. Dooku's voice carried the passionate conviction of someone who genuinely believed his arguments. You've been here for 3 days, Superman. You've seen how they operate. The Jedi, who claim to serve the Force, now serve as generals in a war they don't understand. The Senate, which claims to represent the people, accumulates power in the name of security while democracy withers. The Chancellor is none of your concern, Mace Windu interrupted, arriving on the bridge with Obi-Wan close behind. Whatever you came here to say, Dooku, say it quickly. We have a battle to fight. No, Dooku replied, his holographic form turning to address Windu directly, you don't. I came here to talk, not to fight. My fleet will maintain position at the system's edge. No droid starfighters will launch. No offensive actions will be taken. His attention returned to Superman. I came to offer you something the Jedi cannot, the truth about this war and your place in it. We're not interested in Sith lies, Anakin snarled, his hand white-knuckled on his lightsaber hilt. Lies? Dooku's expression conveyed disappointment, as if Anakin had failed some test. Young Skywalker, I taught you better than that. The most effective manipulation isn't lies, it's selective truth. And the truth I offer Superman is this: the Republic is losing this war not because of separatist military superiority, but because it's being destroyed from within. By a Sith Lord the Jedi can't find. By corruption the Senate won't address. By a system so broken that even your precious democracy has become tyranny with better public relations. Superman felt the words land with uncomfortable accuracy. He'd been thinking similar thoughts since arriving in this galaxy, had seen the cracks in the Republic's facade, had questioned whether the Jedi were fighting for something worth saving. You're describing problems we already know about, Obi-Wan said, his voice carrying the patience of someone accustomed to Dooku's rhetorical games. But you're offering no solutions, only the chaos of war and the promise that somehow the Separatist alliance would be better. We know you, Dooku. We know what the Sith want, power, not justice. Do you? Dooku's hologram leaned forward slightly, and Superman saw something in his expression that troubled him, sincerity mixed with zealous conviction. Tell me, Obi-Wan, what happens when this war ends? When the Separatists are defeated, when the droid armies are dismantled, when every contested system is brought back under Republic control? Do you truly believe the Chancellor will relinquish his emergency powers? That the Senate will dismantle the surveillance apparatus built to fight this war? That the clone army will simply retire to quiet lives of peaceful domesticity? The bridge went very quiet. Officers exchanged glances. Clone troopers shifted uncomfortably. Even Anakin's rage seemed to falter against the weight of questions everyone had considered but few had voiced. Or, Dooku continued, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, will you discover that you've spent years fighting to preserve a republic that no longer exists? That the democracy you died to defend was already dead before the first battle began? Superman watched the Jedi's faces, saw the micro-expressions that revealed doubt carefully suppressed, and understood what Dooku was doing. This wasn't a military operation. It was psychological warfare targeting the Republic's moral certainty. Creating doubt where there had been conviction. Planting questions that would grow like weeds through their confidence. It was exactly what Lex Luthor would do, attack not the body but the belief system that motivated it. Why are you telling me this? Superman asked, cutting through the tension. You didn't bring a fleet here just to philosophize about Republic corruption. What do you actually want? Dooku's holographic smile was approving, as if Superman had asked the question he'd been waiting for. I want to offer you a choice, Superman. The Jedi will ask you to be their weapon, a tool to be deployed when convenient and contained when threatening. They'll dress it in noble language about serving the greater good, but the reality is simple, they fear you, and fear makes people controlling. And your alternative? Superman demanded. Freedom, Dooku replied simply. When the Separatists are defeated, when the droid armies are dismantled, when every contested system is brought back under Republic control. Do you truly believe the Chancellor will relinquish his emergency powers? That the Senate will dismantle the surveillance apparatus built to fight this war? That the clone army will simply retire to quiet lives of peaceful domesticity? The bridge went very quiet. Officers exchanged glances. Clone troopers shifted uncomfortably. Even Anakin's rage seemed to falter against the weight of questions everyone had considered but few had voiced. Or, Dooku continued, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, will you discover that you've spent years fighting to preserve a republic that no longer exists? That the democracy you died to defend was already dead before the first battle began? Superman watched the Jedi's faces, saw the micro-expressions that revealed doubt carefully suppressed, and understood what Dooku was doing. This wasn't a military operation. It was psychological warfare targeting the Republic's moral certainty. Creating doubt where there had been conviction. Planting questions that would grow like weeds through their confidence. It was exactly what Lex Luthor would do, attack not the body but the belief system that motivated it. Why are you telling me this? Superman asked, cutting through the tension. You didn't bring a fleet here just to philosophize about Republic corruption. What do you actually want? Dooku's holographic smile was approving, as if Superman had asked the question he'd been waiting for. I want to offer you a choice, Superman. The Jedi will ask you to be their weapon, a tool to be deployed when convenient and contained when threatening. They'll dress it in noble language about serving the greater good, but the reality is simple, they fear you, and fear makes people controlling. And your alternative? Superman demanded. Freedom, Dooku replied simply. Join the Separatist Alliance not as a soldier but as an independent agent. Use your considerable abilities to end this war quickly by eliminating the corruption at its source. Help me dismantle the Republic's leadership, not through conquest, but through revealing the truth of what they've become. Then, when both sides have collapsed under the weight of their own failures, we can build something better. A galaxy where power serves justice rather than the reverse. You're asking him to commit treason, Mace Windu stated flatly. To betray the Republic and join terrorists who've killed millions. I'm asking him to recognize that Republic and Separatist are just labels we apply to the same fundamental struggle, who should control the galaxy's future. Dooku's expression remained calm, reasonable, the perfect picture of an idealist offering difficult truths. Superman exists outside our conflicts, outside our force-bound philosophies. He could be the catalyst that ends this war before it consumes everything. All he needs is the courage to choose principle over convenience. Superman felt every eye on the bridge turn toward him. Felt the weight of expectation from clone troopers who saw him as a savior, Jedi who saw him as a threat, and officers who saw him as an unknown quantity that could shift the entire balance of power. And standing in that spotlight, surrounded by people waiting for his answer, Clark Kent, the farmboy from Kansas who'd been taught that truth, justice, and compassion mattered more than power, made his choice. No, Superman said simply. Dooku's expression flickered, surprise, then respect, then calculated reassessment. You refuse without even considering. I refuse because I've heard this speech before, Superman interrupted, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who'd faced manipulators far more sophisticated than a Sith Lord playing at philosophy. Different words, different context, but the same fundamental lie. That the ends justify the means. That violence in service to noble goals is somehow different from violence in service to selfish ones. That I should use my power to force people toward the future I think they should have. He stepped closer to the hologram, his cape settling around his shoulders in a gesture that somehow conveyed finality. You're right that the Republic is corrupt. Right that this war is destroying both sides. Right that there are no easy answers. But your solution, tearing down everything and building on the ruins, that's not justice. That's just destruction dressed in revolutionary clothing. Then what do you propose? Dooku challenged. That you simply stand aside and let millions more die while the Jedi fumble toward defeat? I propose, Superman replied, that I do what I've always done, protect people who can't protect themselves, stand against injustice wherever I find it, and trust that individuals given the chance will usually choose what's right over what's easy. His expression hardened. I won't be your weapon, Dooku. I won't be the Jedi's weapon. I won't be anyone's weapon. I'm a person making choices based on principles, and those principles don't include overthrowing governments or deciding who deserves to rule. For a long moment, Count Dooku simply stared at Superman through the holographic projection. Then, slowly, he inclined his head in a gesture that might have been respect or might have been something more calculated. "I see," Dooku said quietly. "You're exactly what you appear to be, an idealist who genuinely believes in the goodness of ordinary beings and the power of noble example." How refreshingly naive. His tone wasn't mocking, just observational. "Very well, Superman. I won't force the issue today. But I will offer you one final piece of information, free of charge, because I believe you'll eventually need it. I'm not interested in. The clone army has inhibitor chips implanted in their brains," Dooku interrupted, his voice cutting through Superman's objection like a vibrablade. "Organic components that can be activated remotely to override their free will and force absolute obedience to specific commands. Commands like, eliminate all Jedi." The bridge went deathly silent. Anakin's lightsaber hummed as his grip tightened. Mace Windu's expression became a mask that revealed nothing. Obi-Wan's hand moved to his beard in the unconscious gesture that meant he was processing troubling information. And Superman's X-ray vision reflexively scanned Captain Rex, standing at attention nearby, his armor betraying nothing of the man beneath. Superman's enhanced perception drilled through plastoid and flesh, mapping bone structure and musculature, until he found it, a small organic component embedded at the base of the clone's skull, connected to neural pathways in ways that suggested external control capability. "You're lying," Mace Windu said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Dooku's holographic smile was sad rather than triumphant. "The Kaminoans are brilliant geneticists, Master Windu, but they're not idealists. They create soldiers for whoever pays them. And the being who commissioned the clone army, who designed every aspect of their creation, that being planned for every contingency. Including what happens when his loyal Jedi generals become inconvenient. Why tell us this?" Obi-Wan demanded. "If it's true, and I'm not conceding that it is, revealing it only warns us to defend against it." "Because," Dooku replied, his aristocratic features settling into an expression of genuine sorrow, "I want Superman to understand what he's defending. I want him to recognize that the republic he's chosen to protect was born compromised, exists through slavery, and will eventually betray everyone who served it. When that moment comes, when the Jedi lie dead at the hands of soldiers they trusted, I want him to remember that I offered him another path." The hologram flickered and began to fade. Dooku's final words echoed through the bridge speakers, "My fleet will withdraw. No blood will be spilled today. But soon, Superman, you'll have to choose again, stand with the Jedi in their beautiful, doomed idealism, or help me build something better from the ashes of their failure. I very much hope you'll make the right choice." The transmission ended. The hologram vanished. And on the bridge of the Venator, surrounded by Jedi and clones and officers who just had their fundamental assumptions challenged, Superman stood in silence, knowing that everything had just become infinitely more complicated. Because if Dooku was telling the truth, if the clone army really did have kill switches built into their brains, then the Republic's defenders were bombs waiting for someone to push the detonation button. And Superman had no idea how to defuse millions of bombs scattered across thousands of star systems fighting a war that might already be lost. The medical bay of the Jedi Temple hummed with the soft sounds of advanced technology meeting ancient healing practices. Bacta tanks lined one wall, their blue-green liquid containing injured clone troopers in various stages of regeneration. Medical droids moved between patients with mechanical efficiency. And in a private examination room sealed behind reinforced doors, Superman stood beside a surgical table where Captain Rex lay unconscious, his helmet removed and his skull exposed to reveal the small organic chip Dooku had claimed existed. It was real. Jedi healers surrounded the table, Master Che leading the medical team, her Kiffer features arranged in professional concentration. Obi-Wan and Mace Windu observed from the room's perimeter, their expressions grim. Anakin paced like a caged animal, his anger radiating in waves that Superman couldn't sense through the Force but could recognize through body language and the tight control in his voice. "How many clones have this?" Anakin demanded, not for the first time. All of them, Master Che replied, her scanner mapping the chip's neural connections with disturbing precision. Every clone produced on Kamino has an identical organic implant. The Kaminoans designed it to be undetectable. It mimics natural brain tissue, integrates with existing neural pathways, and remains dormant until activated by external signal. Superman leaned closer, his X-ray vision examining the chip at cellular resolution. The biotechnology was remarkable, far beyond anything Earth's medical science had achieved. The chip interfaced directly with Rex's motor cortex, limbic system, and executive function centers. When activated, it wouldn't just override his free will. It would turn him into a puppet, his body controlled remotely while his consciousness screamed helplessly from within. "Can you remove it?" Superman asked quietly. "Yes," Master Che confirmed, her hands steady as she prepared surgical instruments with the Force. "But the procedure is delicate. The chip's removal could cause permanent brain damage if we're not careful. Memory loss, personality changes, motor function impairment, all possible complications. And if we remove it from all the clones?" Obi-Wan's voice carried the weariness of someone calculating impossible logistics. 3 million soldiers scattered across the galaxy, all requiring neurosurgery performed by specialists we don't have enough of. The war wouldn't pause while we operated. We'd be defenseless. "Then we tell them," Anakin said fiercely. "We tell every clone about the chips and let them choose whether to have them removed. It's their brains. Their lives. They deserve to know they've been programmed like droids." Mace Windu's expression remained carefully neutral, but Superman heard the tension in his voice. "And when word spreads, and it will spread, that the Republic has been using soldiers with kill switches in their heads, the political fallout would destroy what little public support the war effort maintains. Systems would secede to the separatists in droves. The Senate would fragment. Everything we've fought for would collapse." "Good," Anakin snapped. "Let it collapse. We're fighting to preserve a lie, Master Windu. A republic that creates slave soldiers and plants bombs in their brains doesn't deserve to survive. Careful, Skywalker." Windu's tone went cold. "That sounds dangerously close to separatist rhetoric. Maybe the separatists are right about some things." Anakin's hand moved toward his lightsaber, not threateningly, but unconsciously, the gesture of someone seeking comfort from a familiar weapon. "Maybe we've been so focused on winning the war that we forgot to question whether the side we're fighting for is worth defending. Enough." Yoda's voice cut through the argument, the ancient Jedi Master entering the medical bay with the slow deliberation of someone who'd witnessed countless crises and survived them all through wisdom rather than power. "Fight among ourselves, we should not. The enemy, we are not. Trapped in a situation not of our making, we all are." The room fell into tense silence. Master Che continued her examination of Rex's chip, documenting its structure with clinical precision. The clone captain remained unconscious, sedated for the procedure, unaware that the Jedi were debating his fundamental autonomy. Superman had remained quiet during the argument, processing information and comparing it to similar situations from his own universe. He'd faced mind control before, fought allies who'd been turned against him by telepaths, technology, or alien influence. But this was different. This was systematic, institutional, built into millions of soldiers from their creation. Slavery not just of their bodies but of their very thoughts. "There's another option," Superman said, breaking his silence. "One nobody's mentioned yet." All eyes turned to him. Yoda's ears perked forward with interest. Mace Windu's expression suggested deep skepticism. Anakin looked desperate for any alternative to the impossible choices they faced. "Find who commissioned the clone army," Superman continued, his investigative instincts assembling the puzzle pieces. "Dooku said someone designed every aspect of the clone's creation, including the chips. Someone paid the Kaminoans. Someone specified the behavioral controls. Find that someone, and you find either the Sith Lord you're looking for or someone close enough to lead you to him. Obi-Wan stroked his beard thoughtfully. We've tried. The records were erased. Master Sifo-Dyas supposedly commissioned the army, but he died before the clones were created. The investigation led nowhere. Because you were using force-based investigation techniques, Superman countered. Trying to sense truth through the Force, reading the intentions of witnesses, looking for dark side corruption. But the Sith exist outside your normal detection methods. They've hidden themselves using the same force you're trying to use to find them. And you propose what, exactly? Mace Windu asked, his tone suggesting he already didn't like where this was going. Let me investigate the way I would back home. Follow the money. Track financial records, shipping manifests, communication logs. The Kaminoans are brilliant geneticists, but they're also mercenaries. They got paid. That payment left a trail, account transfers, currency exchanges, shell corporations used to hide the source. Trails like that can't be erased through the Force. They're digital, bureaucratic, mundane. Exactly the kind of evidence your philosophy isn't optimized to pursue. Yoda tapped his Jimmer stick against the floor, the rhythmic sound somehow conveying deep consideration. Interesting, this approach is different from Jedi methods, it is. Perhaps, too different. We don't have time for traditional Jedi methods, Anakin interjected, his voice carrying the urgency of youth combined with hard-earned combat wisdom. Every day we delay, more clones are created with chips in their heads. More systems fall to the separatists. More people die. If Superman can find answers faster than our slow, careful, force-guided investigation, then we'd be fools not to let him try. Or we'd be fools to trust an outsider with access to our most sensitive intelligence, Mace Windu countered. He's been here less than a week. We know nothing about his ultimate loyalties, his potential vulnerabilities, or what he might do with information that could destabilize the Republic. Superman met Windu's challenging gaze directly. Then watch me. Assign someone to monitor my investigation. Give me limited access, just financial records related to Kamino. If I find something actionable, you verify it before acting. If I abuse the access, you revoke it. But at least let me try, because right now, your alternative is doing nothing while millions of clones walk around with time bombs in their brains. Master Che's scanner beeped, drawing attention back to the surgical table. I've completed the preliminary mapping. The chip's removal is feasible, but Captain Rex will need 3 days of recovery before he can return to active duty. And, she hesitated, her professional composure cracking slightly. And he'll know, after the surgery. Know that he was programmed. That every decision he thought was his own might have been influenced by Kaminoan conditioning. The psychological trauma could be severe. Anakin moved to the table, looking down at his friend's unconscious face. Rex had fought beside him through dozens of campaigns, had saved his life countless times, had developed into something far more than just a soldier following orders. He was a person. A friend. Someone who deserved better than being a biological droid with illusions of free will. Remove it, Anakin said quietly. And when he wakes up, I'll tell him the truth myself. He deserves that much. And the other clones? Obi-Wan asked. What do we tell them? Nothing, Mace Windu stated flatly. Not yet. Not until we understand the full scope of this situation. One removed chip tells us it's possible. It doesn't tell us who planted them, what command would activate them, or how to prevent mass activation once word spreads. So we lie to them. Anakin's voice was flat, emotionless in the way that suggested rage barely contained. We send them into battle knowing they're compromised, and we don't warn them because the truth might be politically inconvenient. We protect them from information that would destroy unit cohesion and military effectiveness, Windu corrected. There's a difference between lying and operational security. Is there? Superman interjected, his Kansas farmboy morality clashing with military pragmatism. Because from where I stand, telling soldiers they're free while keeping them in invisible chains. That sounds exactly like what Dooku accused you of doing. Using people as tools while pretending it's for their own good. The observation landed like a physical blow. Mace Windu's hand moved to his lightsaber hilt, not drawing it, but the gesture itself a warning. Obi-Wan closed his eyes, pain flickering across his features. Anakin looked at Superman with an expression that mixed gratitude and vindication. Yoda, however, simply nodded slowly. Right, you may be. Difficult truths, these are. But hiding from difficult truths, the Jedi's greatest failing it has become. The ancient master's gaze swept across the room, settling on each Jedi in turn. Investigate, Superman will. Access to Kamino financial records, grant him we shall. Monitor his work, Master Kenobi will. And Captain Rex, when he wakes, the truth tell him we must. All the truth, no matter how painful. Master Yoda, Mace Windu protested, we can't simply. Can't we? Yoda interrupted, his tone taking on the steel that had made him a legendary warrior before he became a legendary teacher. 800 years, I have lived. Seen the Jedi Order at its height, I have. And seen it decline into dogma and fear, also I have witnessed. Fear of change. Fear of truth. Fear that our power might be less absolute than we believed. His ears drooped sadly. But fear leads to the dark side, yes. And if fear of truth guides our choices, then to the dark side already, we have turned. The silence that followed was absolute. Master Che returned to her surgical preparation, her hands steady despite the philosophical crisis unfolding around her. The medical droids continued their programmed routines, unconcerned with debates about autonomy and truth. And on the table, Captain Rex breathed steadily, unconscious, unaware that his entire understanding of self was about to be reconstructed. Superman felt the weight of responsibility settling over him, not just for the investigation he'd volunteered for, but for the consequences his presence had triggered. He'd pushed these people toward confronting truths they'd been avoiding. Forced them to question foundations they'd built their lives upon. And now, whether by intention or accident, he'd become a catalyst for change in a galaxy that wasn't his own. I'll need access to Republic banking networks, Superman said, pushing past the philosophical quagmire into practical logistics. Financial tracking software. Whatever databases store interstellar transaction records. And someone who understands Kaminoan business practices. Cultural context matters when following money trails. I'll coordinate the access, Obi-Wan offered, his tone suggesting resignation mixed with cautious hope. And I know a former intelligence officer who spent years tracking separatist funding. She might have insights about Kaminoan financial structures. I want to help, Anakin added quickly. I'm terrible at investigations, but I can. You can stay with Rex, Superman interrupted gently. When he wakes up scared and confused, he'll need a friend who won't sugarcoat the truth but also won't let him drown in it. That's more important than whatever grunt work you do helping me chase financial records. Anakin looked like he wanted to argue, then glanced at Rex's unconscious form and nodded slowly. Yeah. Okay. I can do that. Master Che activated her surgical instruments, lightsaber-precise laser scalpels guided by the Force, microscopic manipulators that could work at cellular resolution. This will take approximately 4 hours, she announced. I recommend everyone except essential medical personnel clear the room. Captain Rex deserves privacy for what we're about to do. They filed out slowly, Mace Windu first, his disapproval radiating from every gesture, Obi-Wan next, already contacting his intelligence contact through his comlink, Yoda moving with his characteristic patience, leaning heavily on his Jimmer stick. Superman started to follow, then stopped at the doorway, looking back at the clone captain being prepared for surgery. Rex had trusted him instantly, had defended his presence on the Venator, had thanked him for saving clone lives. That trust deserved to be honored. Master Che, Superman said quietly, when you're done, and when he's recovered enough to understand, tell him I'm sorry. Sorry that he was created this way. Sorry that people he trusted did this to him. And sorry that the galaxy he's fighting for isn't the one he deserved. The Kiffer healer looked up from her preparations, her expression softening slightly. I'll tell him. Though I suspect he'll say you have nothing to apologize for. The clones are remarkably forgiving of circumstances beyond anyone's control. Maybe, Superman replied. But forgiveness doesn't erase the harm. And someone needs to acknowledge that harm, even if they're not the one who caused it. He left the medical bay, his cape trailing behind him, and made his way through the temple's corridors toward the archives where Obi-Wan would set up his investigation workstation. Behind him, surgical lasers began their precise work, cutting into Rex's skull to remove the chip that had made him something less than fully human. And in the shadows of the temple's deeper levels, where ancient Sith artifacts were stored under heavy guard, a presence stirred. Not a physical being, Darth Sidious was far away, playing his role as Chancellor Palpatine, but an echo of dark side energy that had soaked into the temple's foundations over the centuries. That echo recognized Superman's investigation for what it was, a threat to plans that had been brewing for decades. The Sith had spent 1,000 years preparing for this moment. Had orchestrated the Clone Wars with precision that accounted for every variable. Had positioned Palpatine perfectly to seize power when the moment came. But they hadn't accounted for Superman. Hadn't predicted his arrival. Couldn't manipulate someone who existed outside the Force's influence. Which meant, for the first time in a millennium, the Sith's grand design was vulnerable. And Darth Sidious, for all his power and foresight, had no idea how to eliminate a threat he couldn't sense, couldn't predict, and couldn't kill through conventional means. The dark side's echo whispered through the temple's stones, carrying a message across the stars to its master: the variable must be controlled. Or destroyed. Choose quickly, or watch 1,000 years of planning collapse under the weight of one impossibly stubborn alien's moral conviction. In his Senate office, Palpatine felt that whisper and smiled grimly. Superman had just become his highest priority target. Not through direct confrontation, that would risk exposure. But through leverage, manipulation, and the one weapon that worked on even the most powerful beings. Hope. Give Superman something to hope for, a way home, perhaps, or a cause worth sacrificing for, and then threaten to take it away unless he abandoned his investigation and left Sidious's plans intact. It was elegant. Subtle. Exactly the kind of manipulation the Sith had perfected over millennia. Now he just needed to find the right leverage. The right pressure point. The right moment to transform Superman from a threat into a non-factor. And Palpatine had never failed to find someone's weakness before. The Jedi archives occupied 5 levels of the temple's western tower, a cathedral of knowledge containing millions of datacrons, holocrons, and ancient texts spanning 25,000 years of galactic history. Jocasta Nu, the archive's chief librarian, had initially objected to granting an outsider unrestricted access to financial databases. Her objections lasted approximately 30 seconds, until Yoda personally arrived to inform her that Superman's investigation carried full council authorization. Now, 72 hours into his research, Superman sat surrounded by holographic displays that would have given even Batman's obsessive information-gathering habits a run for their money. Financial records scrolled past his eyes at speeds that would have blurred into incomprehensibility for normal beings. His Kryptonian brain processed the data streams with computer-like efficiency, identifying patterns, flagging anomalies, and constructing a web of connections that grew more disturbing with each passing hour. Obi-Wan entered the private research chamber carrying 2 cups of CAF, the galaxy's caffeinated beverage equivalent, and stopped short at the sight before him. Dozens of holographic windows floated in the air, each displaying different data streams. Transaction records, shipping manifests, communication intercepts, corporate registry filings. Superman's hands moved through the displays like a conductor directing an orchestra, sorting information with the kind of focused intensity that suggested he'd forgotten to sleep, eat, or acknowledge the existence of anything beyond his investigation. "Have you moved from that chair in the last 12 hours? Obi-Wan asked, setting one cup of CAF within Superman's reach. 6 hours, Superman replied without looking away from the displays. I took a break to fly around Coruscant's upper atmosphere. Needed solar radiation and fresh perspective. His finger stabbed at one particular record, highlighting it in red. The Kaminoans were paid through a shell corporation registered on Argao, a banking world with strict privacy laws. That corporation was funded by 7 other corporations, each registered in different sectors. Those were funded by investment portfolios managed by. Please tell me there's a point to this financial archaeology, Obi-Wan interrupted gently, and not just an endless trail of corporate obfuscation. Superman finally looked up, and Obi-Wan saw exhaustion in his eyes, not physical fatigue, but the weariness of someone uncovering truths they wished remained hidden. There's a point. The money trail eventually converges. Every shell corporation, every investment portfolio, every funding mechanism, they all trace back to accounts controlled by the Republic Senate's discretionary security budget. Obi-Wan set his own CAF down carefully, his Jedi training maintaining his composure despite the implications. The Senate paid for the clone army? That should be impossible. An expenditure that large would require oversight, authorization, public record. Unless it was buried in emergency appropriations, Superman continued, pulling up another set of records. Look at this, 3 years before the Clone Wars began, the Senate passed the Security Enhancement Act. Allocated funds for classified defense initiatives against emerging threats. The actual amounts were redacted for security reasons. That act was sponsored by, he paused, the name highlighted in glowing text that seemed to pulse with significance. Senator Palpatine of Naboo, Obi-Wan finished, his voice hollow. Now Chancellor Palpatine. The man we've been granting emergency powers to throughout this entire war. Superman nodded slowly, his expression grim. The man who's used those emergency powers to centralize authority, militarize the Republic, and position himself as indispensable to galactic security. The man who benefits most from this war continuing indefinitely. He gestured at the web of financial connections. Obi-Wan, I can't prove Palpatine is Darth Sidious. But I can prove he's been funding both sides of this conflict. The clone army through Senate discretionary funds. And the separatist war machine through. He pulled up another display, this one showing a complex network of corporate holdings. Through holdings in the banking clan, the Techno Union, and the Commerce Guild. All 3 organizations supply the separatist military. All 3 have significant investments managed by financial advisors who report to holding companies that Palpatine controls through proxies. Obi-Wan stood frozen, his mind working through the implications with the speed of someone trained to solve tactical problems under pressure. He's orchestrating both sides. Ensuring the war never ends decisively. Keeping the Republic desperate enough to grant him power but never so defeated that he loses his position. His hand found his beard, the unconscious gesture of processing disturbing information. And we've been helping him. Every battle we win, every system we liberate, every strategic victory, we're just playing our assigned role in his design. Yes, Superman confirmed quietly. And the inhibitor chips in the clones, those would be his insurance policy. When he's accumulated enough power, when the moment is right, he activates the chips. The clone army turns on the Jedi. The Order is destroyed. And with the Jedi gone, who's left to oppose him? The Senate? He controls it. The military? It's programmed to obey him. The people? They've been conditioned for years to see the Jedi as failures who couldn't end the war. Obi-Wan sank into a chair, suddenly looking every year of his age plus a decade more. We need to present this to the Council immediately. Arrest Palpatine. Expose his manipulation before. Before what? Superman interrupted. Before you start a civil war. Obi-Wan, think about this tactically. Palpatine has spent years building political support. He's the beloved Chancellor who's trying to save the Republic from chaos. You're Jedi generals who've been fighting an increasingly unpopular war. If you move against him without overwhelming evidence, you won't be seen as heroes exposing corruption. You'll be seen as a military coup against legitimate democratic authority. Then we gather overwhelming evidence, Obi-Wan countered, but his voice lacked conviction. Superman shook his head. The evidence I've found requires expertise to understand. Financial forensics, corporate law, multi-sector banking regulations, this isn't simple. By the time you explain it to the Senate, Palpatine will have spun a counter-narrative. Claimed the Jedi are fabricating evidence to justify seizing power. Turned your accusations into proof that the Jedi Order has become too dangerous to leave unchecked. So we do nothing. Obi-Wan's frustration cracked through his Jedi composure. We sit here knowing he's manipulating everything, watching clone troopers die in a war he's orchestrating, and we just accept it because political optics matter more than truth. Superman recognized the pain in that question. He'd felt it himself countless times, the rage at injustice combined with the helplessness of knowing that power alone couldn't solve complex problems. That sometimes the right thing was impossible to do without causing even greater harm. We don't do nothing, Superman said firmly. We prepare. We document everything. We identify Palpatine's vulnerabilities and pressure points. And we wait for him to make a mistake, because manipulators always do eventually. They get overconfident, or impatient, or they underestimate someone who matters. Before Obi-Wan could respond, the chamber's door burst open. Anakin stood in the doorway, his expression wild, his presence radiating an intensity that made Superman's instincts scream danger warnings. Rex is awake, Anakin said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. And he wants to talk to everyone involved in removing the chip. Now. The medical bay had been cleared of all non-essential personnel. Captain Rex sat upright on the examination table, his armor removed, wearing only the black bodysuit that went beneath it. The surgical site on his skull was covered by a Bacta patch, but Superman's X-ray vision confirmed the chip was gone, removed cleanly, with minimal neural damage according to Master Che's final report. But the damage to Rex's psyche was written across his face in every tense muscle and haunted expression. How many of my brothers know? Rex asked without preamble, his voice carrying the command authority of someone who'd led men through impossible situations and demanded answers when promises were broken. Just you, Obi-Wan replied, standing at attention despite there being no military protocol requiring it. We haven't told any other clones. The Council is debating whether full disclosure is wise given the war situation. The Council can debate all they want, Rex said flatly. I'm telling my men. Today. Because they deserve to know they've been programmed to murder Jedi on command. Mace Windu, who'd arrived shortly after Anakin's summons, stepped forward with his hands raised in a placating gesture. Captain, I understand your anger, but consider the tactical implications. If 3 million clone troopers learn they have kill switches in their brains, unit cohesion will collapse. Soldiers will refuse orders, desert their posts, or worse, remove the chips themselves without proper medical supervision and suffer brain damage or death. Good, Rex replied, his tone harder than Dura steel. Let them choose. Let them risk death choosing freedom instead of living as slaves pretending to be soldiers. You're not slaves, Windu countered. You're soldiers serving the Republic, same as. Same as what, General? Rex interrupted, his voice rising. Same as the Jedi who can leave the Order any time they want. Same as the Senate guards who get paid and can resign. Same as the pilots who join voluntarily and can transfer to civilian service. He stood, his posture radiating barely contained fury. We were created to fight. Trained from birth to obey. Programmed with chips that can override our free will. And you want to tell me we're not slaves because you gave us names and treat us like people? The words hung in the air like suspended blaster bolts, waiting to detonate. Anakin looked at his friend with an expression mixing sympathy and guilt. Obi-Wan's diplomatic composure cracked, revealing the shame beneath. Even Mace Windu seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Superman moved forward, positioning himself where Rex could see him clearly. "You're right," he said simply. "Everything you just said, you're absolutely right. The clones are slaves. The Republic has been using you as disposable weapons. And the Jedi, for all their good intentions, participated in that system because stopping the war seemed more important than questioning how it was being fought." Rex's attention snapped to Superman, surprise flickering across his features at the blunt acknowledgement. "Then why did you help them remove the chip? If you agree we're slaves, why participate in a system that enslaves us?" "Because removing the chip was the right thing to do for you, personally, regardless of the larger political situation," Superman replied. "You're a person, Rex. You deserve autonomy over your own mind. What you do with that autonomy, whether you tell your brothers, whether you continue fighting, whether you walk away from all of this, that's your choice to make." "And if I choose to tell them everything?" Rex challenged. "If I tell every clone in the Grand Army that they're programmed to murder Jedi? That the Republic created us as biological droids with delusions of free will? What happens to your precious war effort then?" Mace Windu's hand moved to his lightsaber, not threateningly, but in the unconscious gesture of someone feeling control slip away. "Captain Rex, I cannot allow you to destroy the Republic's military effectiveness based on emotional reaction to. You cannot allow." Rex's voice went dangerously quiet. "General Windu, with all due respect, you don't get to allow or forbid me anything anymore. You removed the chip. That means I'm not your programmed soldier. I'm a free being making my own choices. And right now, I choose to tell my brothers the truth. Even if it costs clone lives." Obi-Wan asked quietly. "Even if panicked soldiers attempt self-surgery and die? Even if the knowledge destroys the morale of men fighting to protect Republic citizens?" Rex hesitated, the question striking at his core identity as someone who'd spent his entire existence protecting his brothers. "Then teach us to remove the chip safely," he said finally. "Train clone medics to perform the surgery. Give us the choice to undergo the procedure or not. But give us the choice, General Kenobi. That's all I'm asking for, the basic dignity of informed consent." Yoda's voice came from the doorway, where the ancient Jedi Master had been observing silently. "Right, Captain Rex is denied this choice, the clones have been. Too long, this injustice has continued." He moved into the room with slow deliberation, his jimmer stick tapping against the floor. "Announce it, we shall. To the entire Grand Army. The truth about the chips, the truth about their purpose, and the truth about their choice." "Master Yoda," Mace Windu protested, "the strategic ramifications." "Irrelevant, they are, if our strategy requires slavery to succeed," Yoda interrupted, his tone carrying finality. "Lost the moral high ground, we have, if our victory requires denying freedom to those who fight for it. Better to lose the war honestly than win it through tyranny." The silence that followed was absolute. Superman watched the Jedi Masters process the implications, a military force potentially fracturing at the worst possible moment, a war that might be lost because they chose ethics over victory, a republic that might fall because its defenders refused to perpetuate injustice. And in that silence, Captain Rex made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. "I'll speak to my men first," Rex said quietly. "The 501st Legion. Let me tell them personally, explain the situation, and give them time to process before we make any army-wide announcement. They're my brothers. They deserve to hear it from me." Anakin moved to stand beside Rex, his hand on his friend's shoulder. "I'll be there with you. We'll face whatever comes together." "As will I," Obi-Wan added, his diplomatic instincts recognizing an opportunity to maintain some semblance of Jedi clone unity even as foundations crumbled. Mace Windu looked at Yoda, silently asking if the Grand Master truly intended to commit to this course of action. Yoda simply nodded once, his decision made and unshakable. "Very well," Windu said finally. "But we do this carefully. 1 legion at a time. Full medical support available for chip removal. Psychological counselors standing by. And if the situation spirals out of control, if clones start dying from botched self-surgery or if military cohesion collapses completely, we pause the disclosure until we can establish better protocols. It wasn't the unconditional freedom Rex wanted. But it was more than the clones had been offered since their creation. It was acknowledgement. Recognition. The beginning of agency even if true autonomy remained distant. Rex nodded slowly. I can work with that, General. As long as you understand that this isn't over. This is just the first step. The clones will have questions about our future after the war. About citizenship. About rights. About whether beings created as property can ever truly be free within the system that created them. Questions we'll address, Obi-Wan promised. I can't promise easy answers. But I can promise you'll be part of the conversation instead of just subjects of it. As the meeting broke up, Jedi leaving to prepare for the most difficult briefing they'd ever give, Rex remaining to receive final medical clearance, Superman hung back, watching the clone captain with an expression of profound respect. That took courage, Superman said quietly. Confronting people who hold power over your life and demanding they recognize your humanity. Rex looked at him, and Superman saw exhaustion beneath the military bearing. I've been fighting for 3 years. Watched brothers die. Followed orders without question because I thought I was serving something worth dying for. His mechanical hand, a replacement from an earlier injury, clenched unconsciously. Finding out I was programmed to betray everything I believe in, that broke something in me, Superman. Something I don't know if I can fix. You don't fix it, Superman replied, drawing on memories of his own crises of faith. You live with it. You accept that the world is more complicated and uglier than you wanted to believe, and then you choose to be better than the circumstances that created you. That's not fixing the break. That's transforming the scar tissue into armor. Rex was quiet for a long moment, processing the perspective. Is that what you did? When you found out your world wasn't what you thought it was? Superman's expression flickered with old pain, memories of discovering Lex Luthor's corruption, of watching good people do terrible things, of realizing that truth and justice weren't simple concepts but battlegrounds where everyone claimed righteousness while inflicting harm. Every day, he admitted. Every single day, I wake up knowing the world is full of injustice I can't fix with strength alone. And every day, I choose to keep trying anyway, because the alternative is accepting that power and cruelty win by default. Does it ever get easier? Rex asked. No, Superman said honestly. But you get stronger. And you find people worth fighting beside. That makes the burden bearable. From across the medical bay, Anakin caught Rex's attention with a gesture. Time to go address the 501st Legion, time to shatter their understanding of reality and hope they could rebuild something better from the fragments. Rex straightened his shoulders, forcing exhaustion beneath military discipline. I should go. My brothers need to know the truth. They need to know they have someone willing to fight for their freedom even when it's terrifying, Superman corrected. You're doing that. That matters more than you realize. After Rex departed with Anakin and Obi-Wan, Superman stood alone in the medical bay, surrounded by the hum of Bacta tanks and medical equipment. Through the walls, his superhearing tracked hundreds of conversations happening throughout the temple. Jedi debating the disclosure's wisdom, clone troopers going about their duties unaware their world was about to change, temple staff preparing for consequences no one could fully predict. And in the Senate building, through kilometers of Durasteel and stone, Superman's hearing found Chancellor Palpatine's voice speaking to someone via holographic communicator. The variable has become too dangerous, Palpatine said, his tone lacking the kindly Chancellor persona he wore publicly. Superman's investigation threatens everything. The clone disclosures will destabilize our forces, but that's manageable. What's not manageable is a being powerful enough to challenge us who cannot be controlled through conventional means. The holographic response was distorted, but Superman recognized Count Dooku's cultured voice. then we use unconventional means, my master. The Kryptonian has demonstrated one consistent vulnerability, his attachment to protecting others. Threaten enough innocents simultaneously, and we force him to make impossible choices. Heroes with absolute power but inflexible morals are remarkably easy to manipulate. See to it, Palpatine commanded. And Count, make the lesson memorable. I want Superman to understand that investigating the Sith carries consequences measured in civilian casualties. The transmission ended. Superman stood very still, his hands clenched into fists that could shatter planets, his mind racing through tactical scenarios and moral calculations. They were going to kill innocents to punish him for seeking truth. We're going to turn his strength into a weapon against his principles. We're going to prove that in a galaxy governed by Sith manipulation, even godlike power couldn't protect everyone. And the worst part, the truly infuriating part, was that they were right. He couldn't be everywhere simultaneously. Couldn't save every hostage or stop every atrocity. His power had limits even if his determination didn't. Which meant the Sith had just declared war not on Superman's strength, but on his hope. And hope, Clark Kent had learned long ago, was both his greatest weapon and his most dangerous vulnerability. The attack came 36 hours later, coordinated across 7 star systems simultaneously with the kind of precision that spoke to meticulous planning and ruthless efficiency. Superman was in the Jedi Temple's communications center when the first distress signals arrived, emergency broadcasts from civilian transports, planetary defense forces, and Republic garrisons all screaming the same message: overwhelming separatist assault, civilian populations targeted, requesting immediate assistance. Ryloth. Christophsis. Naboo. Kashyyyk. Bothawi. Ringo Vinda. Cato Nemoidia. 7 worlds. Billions of civilians. Simultaneous strikes designed to overwhelm the Republic's ability to respond. It's strategically illogical, Admiral Yularen stated from the tactical display, his career military training recognizing patterns that violated conventional warfare doctrine. The Separatists are spreading their forces too thin. Each attack uses enough droids to threaten civilian centers but not enough to achieve permanent occupation. It's like they're trying to draw our attention rather than secure territory. Superman stood at the tactical display, his X-ray vision useless across interstellar distances but his reporter's instinct screaming that this was exactly what it appeared to be, a trap. Not for the Republic's military forces, but for him specifically. Dooku's threat given form: kill innocents until Superman had to make impossible choices about who to save and who to let die. It's bait, Superman said quietly, his voice cutting through the controlled chaos of officers coordinating response fleets. They know I can move faster than your ships. They're counting on me trying to respond personally. Obi-Wan, standing at the operations table with Masters Windu and Yoda, stroked his beard with a thoughtful gesture that meant he was assembling puzzle pieces. If you're right, then responding plays into their hands. But not responding means accepting civilian casualties we could prevent. Unacceptable, both options are, Yoda observed, his ancient eyes fixed on Superman with an intensity that suggested he was seeing beyond the immediate tactical situation. Yet choose, you must. The burden of power, this is, deciding which innocents die when you cannot save all. Superman felt the weight of that burden pressing down like a collapsing star. In his own universe, he'd faced similar situations, villains who'd created disasters across Metropolis simultaneously, forcing him to prioritize which people to save first. Each choice haunted him. Each person he couldn't reach in time became another name added to the list of failures that replayed in his nightmares. But this was worse. This was targeting entire planetary populations specifically to prove that his power had limits. That no matter how fast he flew or how strong he was, the Sith could manufacture suffering faster than he could alleviate it. I'm going, Superman said, his decision made even as his mind catalogued all the reasons it was tactically unsound. I can reach at least 3 of those systems before your fleets arrive. That's 3 populations I can protect while your forces handle the others. And when Dooku springs whatever trap he's prepared, Mace Windu challenged, his warrior's instincts recognizing a losing tactical position. When you arrive exhausted from crossing the galaxy at super speed and discover he's waiting with weapons specifically designed to exploit your vulnerabilities? Then I deal with it, Superman replied, his tone brooking no argument. Because the alternative is letting people die to avoid risk, and that's not who I am. That's not who I'll ever be, no matter how logical the strategic calculation. Anakin, who'd been monitoring clone communications while the 501st processed the chip disclosure revelations, looked up with fierce approval. I'm going with him. My starfighter can't match his speed, but I can coordinate with Republic forces and provide tactical support once we arrive. Negative, Admiral Yularen interjected, his command authority overriding Anakin's enthusiasm. General Skywalker, you're needed here to coordinate the fleet response. Master Kenobi will accompany Superman to Ryloth. It's the closest system and our most strategically vulnerable holding. The 104th Battalion under Commander Wolf can reach Kashyyyk within 12 hours. The 212th will deploy to Naboo. And, the 501st Volunteers for Christophsis, Captain Rex's voice came through the communication system, the clone captain having rejoined his command post despite barely being cleared for duty. My men just learned they were programmed to be weapons. Let us prove we can choose to be shields instead. Mace Windu's expression was unreadable, but Superman heard the slight catch in his voice, reluctant respect for a clone who transformed trauma into determination. Approved, Captain. But maintain communication protocols and withdraw if separatist forces exceed your capacity. That's an order, not a suggestion. Understood, General, Rex acknowledged. 501st moving to deployment positions now. Superman was already moving toward the landing platform, his cape streaming behind him as he navigated the temple's corridors at speeds that made him a blue and red blur to startled Jedi and clone troopers. Obi-Wan followed at a run that would have been impressive for a non-Force user but looked almost comically slow compared to Superman's velocity. By the time the Jedi Master reached the platform, Superman was floating 3 meters above the ground, his body oriented toward the distant stars where Ryloth waited with its Twi'lek population facing annihilation. The twin sons of Coruscant bathed him in golden light, his cells drinking in radiation and converting it to power with Kryptonian efficiency that bordered on miraculous. You can't carry me across interstellar distances, Obi-Wan said, slightly out of breath from his sprint. Human physiology wasn't designed for that kind of exposure or acceleration. Then I'll be careful, Superman replied, extending his hand. I've carried teammates through space before. Held my breath for hours. Wrapped them in my cape to shield them from cosmic radiation and absolute zero. Trust me, Obi-Wan. I won't let you die. The Jedi Master studied Superman's outstretched hand for a long moment, and in that pause, Superman understood what was being asked. Obi-Wan had spent his entire life relying on the Force, trusting in its guidance, drawing strength from its presence, using it as a foundation for every decision. Now he was being asked to trust something entirely outside that framework. To put his life in the hands of a being the Force couldn't touch, predict, or protect. Obi-Wan took Superman's hand. May the Force be with you, he said with a slight smile, even though you exist entirely beyond its reach. Then may my parents' lessons serve the same purpose, Superman replied. Hold on tight and try not to look down. Space is beautiful, but it's also deeply unsettling when you're not used to traveling through it without a ship. He wrapped Obi-Wan in his cape, the Kryptonian fabric responding to his will, forming a protective cocoon that would shield the Jedi from vacuum exposure and radiation. Then, with a gentleness that belied his incredible power, Superman lifted off from the platform and accelerated upward. Coruscant fell away beneath them, the endless cityscape shrinking to a glowing disk, then a point of light, then just another star among billions. The planet's gravity well released them. The thin upper atmosphere gave way to true vacuum. And Superman flew, his trajectory calculated to intersect Ryloth's orbital path with the kind of precision that would have required navicomputers and astrogation charts for conventional ships. Inside the cape's protective folds, Obi-Wan experienced something few Jedi had ever known, travel through the void without metal walls between himself and infinity. Through the fabric, he could see stars streaming past, could sense the vast distances that separated each point of light, could feel the absolute silence that existed beyond atmosphere and air. This is what you experience every time you fly. Obi-Wan's voice was muffled by the cape but audible to Superman's superhearing. More or less, Superman replied, his voice carrying across the void through vibrations in the cape's material. Though usually I have atmosphere to work with. Space flight is lonelier. Quieter. It reminds me that for all my power, I'm still just one person in an impossibly vast universe. They flew in silence for a time, crossing distances that would have taken conventional ships hours while Superman covered them in minutes. His body carved through the vacuum like a living starship, his cape streaming behind him in defiance of physics, his determination focused on reaching Ryloth before Dooku's forces could inflict casualties that would haunt Superman's conscience for years. "Can I ask you something?" Obi-Wan said finally, his voice thoughtful in the way that suggested philosophical inquiry rather than simple curiosity. "Of course. Why do you care?" The question was gentle, not accusatory. "These aren't your people. This isn't your galaxy. You have no obligation to us, no connection to our conflicts, no reason to risk yourself for civilizations you didn't even know existed a week ago. Yet you're flying across the void to save Twi'leks you've never met from an enemy you barely understand. Why?" Superman considered the question carefully, assembling thoughts that reached back to Kansas farmland and forward to a metropolis that existed in a universe impossibly distant from his current location. "My father, my Earth father, Jonathan Kent, once told me a story. He found a bird with a broken wing when he was young. Spent weeks nursing it back to health, feeding it by hand, keeping it safe from predators. When the bird finally healed enough to fly, my father released it. And his own father asked him why he'd bothered. Why waste time and resources on something that couldn't even thank him, that would forget him the moment it flew away. What did your father say?" Obi-Wan prompted. "He said, because I could help, and it needed help, and that was enough." Superman's voice carried the weight of a philosophy that had guided every choice he'd made since putting on the suit bearing his family's crest. The bird didn't need to know his name. Didn't need to be from his farm or his country or his planet. It just needed help that he was capable of providing. And my father believed that being able to help created an obligation to try, regardless of personal connection or expected gratitude. Obi-Wan was quiet, processing the simple profundity of that philosophy. The Jedi teach something similar, compassion for all living things, service to those in need regardless of personal attachment. But we've spent so long fighting this war, making tactical calculations about acceptable casualties and strategic priorities, that we've lost sight of the simplicity at the heart of it. Help because you can. Save lives because they're worth saving. Act with compassion because the alternative is accepting that suffering is inevitable. It's harder than it sounds, Superman admitted. Because you can't save everyone. Can't be everywhere simultaneously. Every choice to help someone means choosing not to help someone else. The math is brutal and unavoidable. Yet you keep trying anyway. Because the alternative is giving up, Superman said simply. And the moment I decide some people aren't worth saving, the moment I start calculating whose lives matter more based on strategic value or political importance, that's the moment I become something other than what my parents raised me to be. Ryloth appeared ahead of them, a red-orange planet orbited by 5 moons, its surface scarred by generations of exploitation and warfare. Even from this distance, Superman's vision could identify separatist droid dropships descending toward population centers, their cargo holds filled with battle droids programmed for maximum civilian casualties. "We're here," Superman announced, adjusting his trajectory toward the primary population center, Lesu, the capital city built into crystalline caverns that had protected Twi'leks from generations of slavers and conquerors. "Hold on. This entry is going to be rough." He hit Ryloth's atmosphere at speeds that generated a plasma sheath around them, his body protecting Obi-Wan from heat that would have vaporized conventional shielding. The sonic boom of their passage shattered windows across 3 districts, but Superman was already decelerating, bleeding off momentum with controlled grace that let him touch down in Lesu's central plaza with barely a tremor. He released Obi-Wan from the cape's protective folds. The Jedi Master stumbled slightly, regaining his equilibrium after experiencing velocity that human biology had never evolved to handle. Around them, Twi'lek civilians stared in a mixture of terror and hope at the being who'd arrived like a meteor wearing a cape. Separatist forces? Obi-Wan asked, igniting his lightsaber with a snap hiss that drew immediate recognition from the civilians, the weapon of a Jedi, symbol of Republic protection. Superman's X-ray vision scanned through the cavern city's stone walls, identifying droid formations with the precision of military-grade sensors. 3 dropships already landed. Approximately 600 battle droids advancing through the Eastern District. 2,000 civilians trapped between the droids and the cavern's natural barriers. We have maybe 5 minutes before the droids reach them. Then we don't waste time planning, Obi-Wan said, his diplomatic persona giving way to the warrior who'd survived countless battles through quick thinking and adaptive tactics. You eliminate the droids. I'll coordinate civilian evacuation to the western caverns where natural defenses provide better protection. Superman nodded, then paused. Obi-Wan, whatever Dooku has planned, it's probably going to happen here. He wanted me spread across 7 systems. When I arrived at only one, he'll consolidate his trap. Then we'll face it together, the Jedi Master replied, his voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who'd stared down death so many times it had become a familiar acquaintance rather than a terrifying stranger. The Force will guide me. Your principles will guide you. Between the two, we'll find a way through. Superman wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that determination and moral clarity could overcome manipulation and ruthless efficiency. But he'd faced beings like Dooku before, villains who understood that the best way to defeat a hero wasn't through superior strength but through forcing impossible choices that would haunt them regardless of outcome. Still, Obi-Wan was right about one thing: time for planning had passed. Time for action had arrived. Superman launched himself toward the Eastern District at supersonic velocity, his trajectory optimized to reach the droid formation before they could engage the trapped civilians. Behind him, Obi-Wan ran toward the civilian clusters, his comlink already coordinating with local Twi'lek resistance leaders to establish evacuation routes. The battle droids registered Superman's approach with droid precision, sensors identifying a threat, tactical computers calculating firing solutions, weapon systems activating with mechanical efficiency. 600 blasters opened fire simultaneously, creating a wall of plasma that would have shredded conventional infantry in seconds. Superman flew through it without slowing. He hit the droid formation like a missile, his impact creating a crater that sent battle droids tumbling. Used his heat vision to cut through 36 units in a sweeping arc, grabbed 2 droids and used them as improvised weapons to bludgeon 30 more into scrap metal. His freeze breath rendered another cluster inoperable, their joints locked by supercooled metal. 90 seconds. 200 droids destroyed. The remaining units adapted, concentrating fire on a single point while tactical droids calculated strategies to slow this impossible opponent. Droideka units rolled in, their shields activating, their twin blasters adding sustained firepower to the already overwhelming barrage. Superman systematically dismantled them, his movements precise and efficient. No wasted motion. No excessive force. Just methodical elimination of threats with the kind of focused intensity that came from fighting for something more important than victory, fighting for people whose names he'd never know but whose lives mattered as much as anyone's in any universe. 4 minutes. All 600 droids neutralized. Superman rose above the cavern city, scanning for additional threats with vision that could perceive electromagnetic signatures through kilometers of stone. More dropships were approaching, reinforcements that suggested Dooku wasn't committing to a full-scale invasion but rather maintaining pressure to keep Superman engaged. Which meant the trap hadn't sprung yet. Obi-Wan, Superman transmitted through the comlink the Jedi had given him, civilian status. Evacuations proceeding smoothly, Obi-Wan replied, his voice slightly winded from coordinating hundreds of frightened people through narrow cavern passages. Local resistance is providing security. We should have everyone clear within. The transmission cut off with a crackle of static. Superman's superhearing caught an explosion, followed by screaming, followed by a voice he recognized from holographic transmissions and intelligence briefings. Superman, Count Dooku's cultured tone carried across the open communication frequencies, ensuring everyone on Ryloth could hear. How fortuitous that you chose this system to defend. I was hoping we might have an opportunity for direct conversation. Superman flew toward Obi-Wan's last known position, his trajectory calculated to intersect the transmission source. If you want to talk, Dooku, you didn't need to terrorize civilians to get my attention. Didn't I? Dooku's voice carried amusement mixed with something darker. You've been investigating my master's financial networks, exposing truths the Sith worked decades to conceal, and generally making yourself an inconvenience to plans that were in motion before your birth. I needed to demonstrate something important, that your power, while impressive, has limitations. That you cannot be everywhere simultaneously. That every moment you spend saving one world is a moment 7 other worlds burn. Superman reached the western caverns where Obi-Wan had been coordinating evacuations. Found the Jedi Master locked in combat with Count Dooku himself, their lightsabers clashing in a duel that spoke to years of master-student history mixed with philosophical betrayal. Around them, Twi'lek civilians cowered behind improvised barricades while battle droids held positions that prevented escape. Ah, there you are, Dooku said, noticing Superman's arrival without breaking his lightsaber form. I was just explaining to my former student that sometimes the greatest test of character isn't defeating your enemies, it's choosing which innocents to save when you can't save them all. He gestured with his free hand, and Superman's superhearing caught the activation of charges placed throughout the cavern system. Explosives positioned at structural weak points, carefully calculated to cause cascading collapses that would bury thousands of Twi'leks beneath millions of tons of stone. You have approximately 45 seconds, Dooku said calmly, his lightsaber still engaged with Obi-Wan's blade, to make a choice, Superman. You can stop me, use your considerable strength to disable me before I can kill Obi-Wan. Or you can prevent the cavern collapse and save 3,000 Twi'lek civilians who are about to die because you came here instead of Kashyyyk or Naboo or any of the other systems currently under attack. Superman's enhanced hearing tracked the charges, 37 separate explosives spread across the cavern system, each positioned to maximize casualties, each requiring physical intervention to disable before detonation. 45 seconds to reach all 37, dismantle them safely, and ensure no secondary collapses. Impossible. Even for him. You can't save everyone, Superman, Dooku continued, his voice carrying the cruel satisfaction of someone proving a philosophical point through human suffering. You can save Obi-Wan, or you can save the civilians. Choose quickly. The clock is ticking. And in that moment, suspended between impossible choices, Superman understood exactly what Dooku was trying to prove, that power alone wasn't enough. That even godlike abilities couldn't overcome strategic cruelty. That heroes with inflexible morals could be manipulated by forcing them to choose between different forms of failure. The Sith Lord had made one mistake, though. One miscalculation born from not truly understanding who Superman was at his core. Because Superman didn't think like a tactician prioritizing assets. He thought like a farmboy from Kansas who'd been taught that every life mattered, that impossible just meant difficult, and that the measure of a hero wasn't whether they succeeded, it was whether they tried with everything they had. I choose both, Superman said simply. Then he moved. Superman became a blur. Not just fast, faster than he'd ever pushed himself in this galaxy, faster than caution or conservation of energy suggested was wise. His body converted solar radiation into kinetic force with Kryptonian efficiency that bent the laws of physics into new shapes. Time didn't slow from his perspective. That was a misconception people had about superspeed, but his thoughts accelerated to match his velocity, processing tactical information at rates that turned seconds into subjective minutes. Explosive Charge 1, Eastern Cavern, Load-Bearing Pillar. Superman's heat vision lanced out with surgical precision, flash melting the detonator's circuitry without triggering the explosive compound. 0.8 seconds elapsed. Charges 2 through 7, networked cluster in the Northern District, designed for cascading failure. Superman flew through the sequence, his hands moving with such speed that the air displaced by his passage created vacuum pockets that collapsed with thunderous booms. Each device disabled through a different method: crushed detonators, severed wiring, explosive compounds supercooled until they became inert. 4.2 seconds elapsed. Meanwhile, his divided attention tracked Count Dooku and Obi-Wan. The Sith Lord had abandoned his duel, recognizing that Superman's choice to save everyone meant Dooku himself was now the secondary priority. But abandoning the duel didn't mean surrendering. Dooku's hands crackled with force lightning, the dark side energy arcing toward Obi-Wan in lethal brilliance. Superman altered his trajectory mid-flight, intercepting the lightning with his own body. The dark side energy splashed against his invulnerable skin, dissipating harmlessly into the surrounding air. Dooku's eyes widened, the briefest flicker of genuine surprise, before Superman continued his blur of motion toward the remaining explosives. Impossible, Dooku breathed, but Superman was already gone, racing through stone corridors at speeds that created sonic booms powerful enough to crack walls. Charges 8 through 15, Southern Cavern System, Civilian Shelter Area. These were the cruelest placements. Dooku had positioned them where panic-fleeing Twi'leks would trigger secondary collapses even if the primary charges were disabled. Superman didn't just disarm them. He used his freeze breath to create structural ice reinforcements, temporary supports that would hold long enough for proper evacuation. 12.6 seconds elapsed. Obi-Wan recovered from the lightning's near miss, his lightsaber coming up in a defensive stance as battle droids converged on his position. Superman. The charges in the Western Gallery, I can sense 30 Twi'lek children hiding there. Superman heard them, heard their terrified breathing, their whispered prayers to gods he didn't recognize, their small hearts beating with the rapid rhythm of prey animals sensing predators. The Western Gallery charges were positioned to bury the children under rubble, a mass grave orchestrated with Sith precision. Charges 16 through 24, Western Gallery. Superman flew through solid stone rather than navigate corridors, his body creating tunnels through compressed minerals that had stood for millennia. Each charge received personal attention, not just disabled but completely destroyed, their explosive compounds scattered into molecular components that couldn't accidentally detonate from stray energy discharges. 28.3 seconds elapsed. "You're fast," Dooku acknowledged, his aristocratic composure cracking slightly as he watched his carefully orchestrated trap fall apart. "Faster than my calculations suggested. But speed alone won't save you from the fundamental problem, Superman. There are 7 worlds under attack. 7 populations crying out for salvation. And you're here, on Ryloth, saving these Twi'leks while others die because you couldn't be everywhere at once." Superman emerged from the stone tunnel, his cape dusty with mineral fragments, his expression set with determination that transcended mere stubbornness. "You're right. I can't be everywhere. But I can be here. And here is where I'm choosing to make a difference." Charges 25 through 37, deep caverns, water table level, designed to cause flooding that would drown anyone who'd survived the initial collapses. These required more than simple detonator destruction. Superman had to shore up weakened walls, redirect underground streams, and create pressure releases that would prevent catastrophic hydraulic failure. He worked with the focused intensity of someone who understood that structural engineering mattered as much as strength in preventing disasters. 42 seconds elapsed. All 37 charges neutralized. 3,000 Twi'lek civilians saved. Superman returned to the central cavern where Dooku and Obi-Wan faced each other, his arrival creating a downdraft that scattered dust and debris. Battle droids turned their weapons toward him, their tactical programming recognizing the primary threat even if their droid brains couldn't comprehend what they'd just witnessed. "Impressive," Dooku said, and Superman heard genuine respect beneath the aristocratic disdain. "You saved them all. Every civilian. Every child. Every being whose life I threatened to prove a point about your limitations. His lightsaber hummed as he adjusted his stance, curved blade reflecting the cavern's bioluminescent lighting. But you've exhausted yourself. I can see it in your posture, the slight decrease in hovering altitude, the micro-tremors in your hands, the way your breathing has accelerated despite your species' superior physiology. You pushed beyond sustainable output to achieve the impossible. And now. The Sith Lord's free hand extended, and Superman felt something he'd experienced only a handful of times in his life, genuine physical force that actually moved him. Not the force as Jedi understood it. Dooku couldn't affect Superman through those means, but telekinetic power leveraged against the environment around Superman. Stone pillars collapsed inward, thousands of tons of rock accelerated by dark side energy creating a cage that would have crushed any normal being. Superman shattered through it with a punch that reduced ancient stone to powder, but Dooku had used the momentary obstruction to close distance with Obi-Wan. The Sith Lord's lightsaber pressed against the Jedi's defense, crimson blade locked with blue, two warriors who'd once shared master-student bonds now trying to kill each other with weapons that represented opposing philosophies. You see the problem, don't you? Dooku said, his voice carrying across the cavern with force-amplified projection. You have power, Superman. But I have leverage. Hostages. Tactical positioning. Every time you move to stop me, I threaten someone you've decided is worth saving. Every time you choose to save innocence, I gain positional advantage against your Jedi allies. The math is simple, you cannot defeat me without accepting casualties. And you won't accept casualties because your moral code forbids it. Superman's hands clenched, frustration warring with tactical assessment. Dooku was right about the strategic situation. Every move Superman made to protect civilians gave the Sith Lord opportunities to hurt Obi-Wan or position battle droids for maximum civilian casualties if Superman engaged directly. So what do you want? Superman demanded. You didn't orchestrate this elaborate trap just to prove you can frustrate me. There's an objective here. State it clearly instead of hiding behind philosophy and tactical games. Dooku's lightsaber disengaged from Obi-Wan's blade, the Sith Lord stepping back with theatrical flourish. What I want, Superman, is for you to understand your position in this galaxy. You're powerful, perhaps the most individually powerful being currently alive. But power without strategic thinking is just force waiting to be redirected by someone more clever. And the Sith are very, very clever. He gestured, and holographic displays materialized in the cavern air, real-time footage from the 6 other worlds under simultaneous attack. Kashyyyk's Wookiees fighting battle droids in the Roshar forests. Naboo's cities burning under orbital bombardment. Christophsis' crystal spires shattering under artillery fire. Each world a portrait of suffering orchestrated specifically to make a point. You chose to save Ryloth, Dooku continued. A reasonable choice, it was closest, most immediately threatened, and contained Obi-Wan who you've developed friendship with. But your choice meant not saving Kashyyyk first. Or Naboo. Or any of the others. People are dying right now on 6 different worlds because you're here instead of there. And that will haunt you, Superman. That knowledge that your choice, your heroic, morally correct choice to save 3,000 Twi'leks, cost 10,000 Wookiees or 50,000 Naboo civilians their lives. Superman's jaw clenched, the muscles visible beneath invulnerable skin. Those deaths are on you, Dooku. You orchestrated the attacks. You positioned the explosives. You're the one choosing to kill innocents to prove philosophical points about the limits of heroism. True, Dooku acknowledged with aristocratic ease. But irrelevant. Because the beings who die today won't care about my philosophical motivations. They'll care that Superman, the being powerful enough to save anyone, chose not to save them. And their families will remember. And the galaxy will learn that even godlike power can't overcome strategic cruelty. Is there a point to this lecture? Obi-Wan interjected, his lightsaber still active but his posture shifted to diplomatic readiness, or are you simply enjoying the sound of your own voice? Dooku's expression flickered, Annoyance mixed with the ghost of fondness for a student who'd always possessed more spine than reverence. The point, my dear Obi-Wan, is that Superman must choose. Continue interfering in this war, continue investigating my master's identity and plans, continue being an uncontrollable variable, and I will ensure that every intervention costs civilian lives. I will orchestrate situations where his power creates collateral damage. Where his presence escalates conflicts that would have remained contained. Where his moral absolutism becomes the very thing that maximizes suffering. Or. Superman prompted, recognizing negotiation structure even wrapped in Sith manipulation. Or you leave, Dooku said simply. Find a way back to your universe. Use that formidable intellect to solve the problem of interdimensional travel. Abandon this galaxy to its fate and return to your Earth where you can be the hero they need instead of the complication we don't. Make that choice, and I guarantee the attacks stop. The 7 worlds currently under siege receive withdrawal orders immediately. No more orchestrated disasters. No more innocent deaths caused by my attempts to prove you're more liability than asset. The offer hung in the cavern air like suspended poison, attractive because it would immediately save lives, repulsive because it meant abandoning principles and people who'd come to rely on Superman's presence. You're bluffing, Obi-Wan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Your master wouldn't approve of offering Superman an easy exit. There's strategic value in keeping him engaged, forcing him to make compromises that erode his moral certainty. Perhaps, Dooku agreed. Or perhaps my master recognizes that Superman's investigation threatens plans decades in the making, and eliminating that threat through voluntary exile is preferable to the messy alternatives. His gaze fixed on Superman with uncomfortable intensity. I'm offering you exactly what you want, a return home to the universe where you belong, to the people who need you, to the life you've been torn from. All you have to do is stop interfering in conflicts that aren't yours to solve. Superman stood silent, processing the offer through the lens of every value Jonathan and Martha Kent had instilled in him. He thought of Lois, probably still searching for him despite impossible odds. Thought of his parents in Smallville, worried sick about their son who'd vanished without explanation. Thought of the Justice League, his friends and colleagues, operating without one of their most powerful members because he'd been torn from their universe by accident and malice. He could go home. Could return to the life he'd built, the relationships that defined him, the responsibilities he'd sworn to uphold. All he had to do was abandon this galaxy to the Sith's machinations and accept that some problems weren't his to solve. No, Superman said. Dooku's eyebrow rose. No. I'm offering you everything you want. You're offering me escape disguised as heroism, Superman interrupted, his voice carrying absolute certainty. You're trying to convince me that the moral choice is to run away because my presence complicates your master's plans. That I should value my personal desires over the lives of people who need help I can provide. He stepped forward, cape settling around his shoulders in the gesture that had come to represent hope to billions in his own universe. But my father taught me that being able to help creates an obligation to try. Not just when it's convenient. Not just when the people in danger are from my home planet or my universe or my preferred cultural background. Every time. All the time. Regardless of personal cost. Even if your help causes more harm than good. Dooku challenged. Even if your presence escalates conflicts. I don't accept that premise, Superman replied. You're claiming that resisting evil causes more harm than tolerating it. That standing against tyranny is worse than accepting injustice. That I should measure my actions by the suffering villains threaten to inflict rather than the good I can accomplish. That's the philosophy of someone who's already surrendered to the idea that cruelty wins. He flew forward, not attacking Dooku directly, but positioning himself between the Sith Lord and the cavern's civilian population. Here's my counteroffer, take your droid armies and leave Ryloth. Withdraw from the 7 systems you're attacking. Stop orchestrating massacres to prove points about the limits of heroism. And maybe, I won't spend every waking hour hunting down your master's identity and exposing the corruption at the heart of this entire war. Dooku's expression shifted through surprise, respect, and something that might have been regret. "You're making a mistake, Superman. A noble mistake, perhaps, but one that will cost lives. My master is patient, strategic, and utterly ruthless. He will find your weaknesses, psychological if not physical, and exploit them until you either break or flee. And when that happens, you'll wish you'd accepted my offer of peaceful exile. Then I'll deal with it when it comes," Superman said simply. "Because the alternative is surrendering to fear of what might happen instead of acting on what's right now. And I didn't survive being the last son of a dead world, didn't build a life dedicated to helping others, didn't carry the symbol of hope across my chest for years, just to abandon those principles the moment they became inconvenient." For a long moment, Count Dooku simply studied Superman, his aristocratic features arranged in an expression of genuine contemplation. Then, slowly, he deactivated his lightsaber and bowed with theatrical courtesy that somehow conveyed both respect and mockery. "Very well, Superman. You've chosen the difficult path. I admire your conviction even as I pity the suffering it will cause." He gestured to his battle droids, which immediately began withdrawing toward their dropships. "Ryloth is yours. The other 6 systems will receive withdrawal orders within the hour. I keep my promises even to idealistic fools who reject reasonable offers." "Why?" Obi-Wan demanded, his lightsaber still active, his posture suggesting he expected another trap. "Why withdraw? You've demonstrated Superman's limitations. You've proved your strategic superiority. Why give up the tactical advantage?" Dooku's smile was sad, almost paternal. "Because, my dear former student, this wasn't about tactical advantage. It was about offering Superman a clear choice between his comfort and his principles. About seeing whether he'd sacrifice his personal desires for strangers in a universe not his own. And he passed that test with flying colors, which tells me everything I need to know about how to manipulate him going forward." The Sith Lord turned toward his extraction point, then paused, looking back at Superman one final time. "You're incorruptible, Superman. Genuinely, frustratingly incorruptible. You can't be tempted by power, can't be bought with personal gain, can't be frightened into inaction. That makes you extraordinarily dangerous, not to civilizations or armies, but to carefully laid plans that depend on predictable self-interest motivating powerful beings." "Is there a point to this assessment?" Superman asked warily. "The point is that incorruptible heroes have exactly one weakness that corrupt villains can exploit: they care about everyone. They refuse to prioritize their own survival over innocence. They throw themselves into impossible situations because letting others suffer is worse than personal death." Dooku's voice dropped to something almost gentle, like a teacher delivering a difficult lesson to a favorite student. "My master will use that weakness, Superman. He'll create situations where your very presence causes harm. Where your attempts to help make things worse. Where the kindest thing you could do is nothing, and he'll engineer events so that doing nothing feels like the cruelest betrayal of everything you stand for." "Then I'll adapt," Superman replied, his tone brooking no argument. "I've faced manipulators before. Survived their schemes. Emerged stronger from their attempts to break me. Your master isn't the first villain to think that caring about people is a weakness. And he won't be the last to discover it's actually the strongest armor anyone can wear." Dooku inclined his head in acknowledgement, something like genuine respect flickering across his aristocratic features. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you'll learn that some galaxies are too broken to save, and sometimes the heroic choice is recognizing when you're out of your depth." He activated his personal comm unit. "Captain, begin extraction. All forces withdraw to hyperspace jump coordinates. This operation is concluded." The battle droids marched toward their dropships with mechanical precision, leaving behind destruction and frightened civilians but, critically, leaving them alive. Superman watched them go, every tactical instinct screaming that this was another layer of manipulation, another trap within traps, but unable to justify attacking a withdrawing force that was no longer threatening immediate harm. As Dooku's shuttle lifted off, Obi-Wan deactivated his lightsaber and approached Superman, his expression mixing relief, concern, and deep thoughtfulness. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've witnessed in 30 years as a Jedi." "Probably both," Superman admitted, feeling exhaustion settling over him now that the crisis had passed. His solar reserves were depleted, his body aching from exertions that pushed even Kryptonian physiology to its limits. "But I meant what I said. I'm not leaving. Not while I can still help. Not while there are people worth fighting for. Even if fighting for them costs you your way home?" Obi-Wan asked quietly. Superman thought of Earth, of Lois and his parents and the Daily Planet and Metropolis and every person who'd come to rely on his protection. Thought of the Justice League, his friends and colleagues who were undoubtedly searching for him with every resource available. Thought of the life he'd built, the identity he'd constructed, the responsibilities he'd accepted. "I'll find another way home," Superman said finally. "Some solution that doesn't require abandoning people who need help. Because if going home means accepting that I let innocents suffer to serve my personal interests, then I won't recognize the person who makes that journey. Won't be able to look at my parents and tell them I honor the lessons they taught me." Obi-Wan placed a hand on Superman's shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie from a warrior who understood the weight of impossible choices. "The Jedi Council will want a full report. Master Yoda especially will be interested in your conversation with Dooku. And," he hesitated. "And they'll want to discuss what happens next. Because you've just declared yourself an active participant in this war, Superman. Not as a Republic asset or a Jedi weapon, but as an independent force pursuing your own agenda. That makes you simultaneously our most valuable ally and our most unpredictable variable." "I can live with that," Superman replied. "As long as unpredictable means I get to follow my conscience instead of someone else's strategic priorities." They flew back to Coruscant together, Superman carrying Obi-Wan through the void, the Jedi Master wrapped in the protective cape, both of them processing the implications of choices made and paths chosen. Behind them, Ryloth's Twi'lek population emerged from shelters to find their world intact, their children alive, their future uncertain but at least existent. And across the galaxy, in his Senate office that overlooked Coruscant's endless cityscape, Darth Sidious received Count Tyrannus's report and smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose plan had succeeded despite apparent failure. Superman had chosen to stay. Had committed himself to this galaxy's conflicts. Had bound himself through emotional investment and moral obligation to events Sidious could now manipulate with surgical precision. The Kryptonian thought he'd won by saving lives and maintaining his principles. But Sidious understood something Superman had yet to learn: the most effective chains weren't made of kryptonite or force energy or physical restraints. They were made of hope, compassion, and the unshakable belief that one person's choices could change the course of galactic events. Superman had just forged his own chains through pure, stubborn idealism. And Sidious intended to use those chains to drag the last son of Krypton down into darkness, not through corruption, but through the slow, grinding realization that even infinite power couldn't save everyone from the machinations of patient, strategic evil. The Jedi Temple's highest meditation chamber had witnessed 8 centuries of contemplation, crisis management, and philosophical debate. Tonight, it bore witness to something unprecedented, a council session where the being under discussion existed entirely outside the Force's framework, challenging every assumption the Order had built its existence upon. Superman stood in the chamber's center, his cape settled around his shoulders, his expression calm but resolute. Around him, the full council had assembled, all 12 masters present physically rather than through hologram, recognizing that this conversation's stakes demanded their complete attention. Master Yoda spoke first, his ancient voice carrying the weight of lifetimes spent navigating impossible situations. "A choice, you have made. To stay in this galaxy, to fight this war, to oppose the Sith's machinations, knowing that home, you may never find. Understand this choice's implications, do you?" "I understand that I can't go home by abandoning the principles that make home worth returning to," Superman replied. "My parents, both sets of parents, taught me that power creates responsibility. That being able to help means you should help. That the measure of a person isn't their abilities but their choices. He met Yoda's gaze directly. I choose to stay because leaving would make me something I'm not willing to become. Mace Windu leaned forward, his warrior's pragmatism cutting through philosophical reflection. Your investigation exposed Chancellor Palpatine's financial connections to both sides of this war. That information could destabilize the Republic, trigger civil unrest, or worse, provide Palpatine with justification to declare martial law and suspend the Senate entirely. What do you propose we do with knowledge that dangerous? Document everything, Superman said immediately. Create redundant records stored in multiple secure locations. Then wait, not because we're afraid to act, but because timing matters. Palpatine has spent years building political capital. Attacking him prematurely just proves we're the military coup he'll claim we are. We need him to overreach, to make a mistake that even his supporters can't rationalize away. And if he never makes that mistake? Ki-Adi-Mundi challenged. If he's patient enough to consolidate power gradually while we wait for an opportunity that never comes? Then we adapt, Superman replied, his tone carrying the conviction of someone who'd spent years fighting strategic villains. We use the information we have to counter his moves, protect Republic institutions he tries to subvert, and maintain pressure that prevents him from acting freely. Lex Luthor, a brilliant manipulator from my world, taught me that perfect plans require perfect execution. Any disruption, any unexpected resistance, forces adjustment. We become that disruption. Obi-Wan, standing slightly apart from the Council's formal arrangement, stroked his beard thoughtfully. There's another complication we haven't addressed, the clone army. Captain Rex has begun sharing information about the inhibitor chips with the 501st Legion. Early reports suggest they want the chips removed, but they're terrified of the procedure's risks. We're looking at a military force on the edge of fragmenting just as we need them most. Then we support them through the transition, Superman said firmly. Provide medical resources for safe chip removal. Offer psychological counseling for clones processing the betrayal of being created as programmed weapons. And most importantly, start treating them like the citizens they deserve to be rather than military assets we're afraid to acknowledge as people. Shakti, who'd spent years on Kamino overseeing clone training, spoke with the careful precision of someone navigating painful truths. The political implications of granting clones citizenship would destabilize dozens of Republic policies. Their legal status as property of the state rather than sovereign beings undergirds military appropriations, deployment protocols, and casualty calculations. Acknowledge them as people with rights, and the entire structure of how we've prosecuted this war becomes legally and morally indefensible. Good, Superman replied, his Kansas farmboy directness cutting through Jedi philosophical complexity. Let it be indefensible. Let the Republic confront the fact that it's been committing atrocities in the name of security. Either the government reforms to align with its stated values of freedom and dignity, or it reveals itself as the corrupt system Dooku claims it is. Either outcome is preferable to perpetuating slavery while pretending to fight for liberation. The silence that followed was profound. Several council members exchanged glances through the Force, communicating in ways Superman couldn't perceive but could recognize through body language and subtle expressions. He was pushing them toward confrontations they'd been avoiding, forcing acknowledgement of truths that had been buried beneath strategic necessity and wartime pragmatism. Yoda's ears drooped, the gesture Superman had learned indicated deep sadness mixed with acceptance. Right, you are. Uncomfortable truths, these are. But facing them, we must. Too long, the Jedi have served a republic we did not examine closely enough. Too readily, we assumed that democracy meant justice, that laws equaled morality, that power wielded by elected officials could not be tyranny. Master Yoda, Mace Windu protested, surely you're not suggesting the Republic itself is illegitimate. Suggesting, I am, that legitimacy must be earned continuously, not assumed from historical precedent, Yoda interrupted, his tone carrying steel beneath the grammatical peculiarities. A government that enslaves millions, that orchestrates wars for political gain, that plants kill switches in soldiers' brains, legitimate, can such a government claim to be? Or merely powerful? The question hung in the chamber's air like a suspended blade, forcing every Jedi Master to confront the implications of their service. They had become generals in a war they didn't fully understand, fighting to preserve a system that was already corrupted, possibly beyond redemption. Plo Koon, his breathing mask creating gentle mechanical sounds, spoke with the measured tone of someone considering multiple perspectives. If we accept Superman's analysis, if we acknowledge that the Republic has become the very tyranny it claims to oppose, what then? Do we rebel against our own government? Do we abandon the citizens who rely on our protection? Do we stand aside and watch the galaxy burn because all available options involve moral compromise? We do what we've always done, Obi-Wan said quietly, his voice carrying hard-earned wisdom. We make the best choices available in impossible situations. We try to minimize harm even when we can't eliminate it. We acknowledge our failures without letting them paralyze us. And we trust that consistent application of principle, even imperfect principle, eventually creates change. Superman nodded slowly, recognizing in Obi-Wan's philosophy something close to his own approach. I can't fix this galaxy. I'm one person, regardless of my abilities. But I can stand as an example of what's possible when you refuse to compromise core values even under extreme pressure. I can protect people when they're threatened. I can expose truth when it's hidden. And I can make the powerful uncomfortable enough that they can't act with impunity. A symbol, Yoda observed, his ancient eyes gleaming with something like satisfaction. Not a weapon or a general or a tool, a symbol. Of hope, of resistance, of the possibility that power can serve justice instead of self-interest. Needed, such symbols are. Perhaps needed most when darkness seems inevitable. The council session concluded without formal resolutions or strategic mandates, just a collective understanding that the galaxy had changed, that the Jedi Order's role was shifting, and that Superman represented not just an asset but a mirror forcing them to see themselves with uncomfortable clarity. As the Masters filed out, Anakin approached Superman with an expression mixing gratitude and uncertainty. Captain Rex wants to see you. He's been asking since you returned from Ryloth. They found Rex in the Temple's clone barracks, a section reserved for troopers undergoing medical treatment or awaiting deployment. The captain sat on his bunk, his armor polished to regulation standards despite the surgical recovery still requiring back-to treatments. Around him, other members of the 501st were engaged in quiet conversations, their body language suggesting men processing information that had shattered their understanding of reality. Superman, Rex said, standing with military precision despite obvious discomfort. I wanted to thank you. For the chip removal. For the honesty. For treating us like people instead of equipment. You are people, Superman replied simply. That was never in question for me. Though I'm sorry it took an outsider to force everyone else to acknowledge what should have been obvious from the beginning. Rex's expression flickered, pain, anger, and something that might have been hope struggling against cynicism. The men have been talking. About what happens when the war ends. About whether we have futures beyond fighting. About, he hesitated. About whether the republic we've been dying for is worth saving, or if we've just been tools maintaining a system that was already rotten. Those are questions I can't answer for you, Superman said gently. I can tell you what I believe, that systems are made of people, and people can change them if they refuse to accept that corruption is inevitable. But you and your brothers need to decide what kind of future you want and what you're willing to do to achieve it. And if we decide we want nothing to do with the Republic after this? Rex asked, his tone carefully neutral. If we choose to walk away from the war, from the Jedi, from everything we were created to serve? Superman smiled slightly. Then I'd respect that choice. Freedom means the right to reject the purposes others assign to you. Whatever you and your brothers decide, I'll support it, whether that's continuing to fight, demanding citizenship and rights, or finding some third option nobody's considered yet. Rex absorbed this, his expression revealing the internal struggle of someone raised from birth for a single purpose, now contemplating alternatives he'd never been allowed to imagine. "The galaxy's changing," he said finally. "Because you're here. Because you refuse to accept that some injustices are too big to fight. The Council doesn't know what to do with that. Palpatine's probably terrified of what it means for his plans. And beings like me, beings who were supposed to be weapons, are starting to think maybe we could be something more." "You already are something more," Superman corrected. "You always were. You just needed someone to acknowledge it." They stood in companionable silence, two beings from vastly different origins finding common ground in the shared conviction that dignity mattered, that freedom was worth fighting for, and that the powerful had obligations to the powerless that couldn't be ignored for strategic convenience. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy slowly adjusted to its new reality. Clone troopers across dozens of legions underwent voluntary chip removal, the procedures coordinated by Jedi healers and clone medics working together. The 501st became a model for how the process could work: open communication, psychological support, and acknowledgement that fear of the procedure was legitimate rather than weakness to be overcome through discipline. Superman continued his investigation into Palpatine's networks, documenting connections with the meticulous care of an investigative journalist who understood that extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence. He coordinated with Republic intelligence officers who'd been quietly investigating corruption for years, their efforts previously stymied by political obstacles that Superman's outsider status allowed him to circumvent. The war continued, but its character shifted. Jedi began questioning orders, demanding explanations for strategies that prioritized territory over lives. Clone commanders asserted agency, refusing assignments that treated their men as expendable. And across contested systems, populations caught between Republic and Separatist forces found themselves protected by a being in blue and red who appeared when massacres threatened, stopped atrocities before they could unfold, and disappeared before anyone could claim authority over his actions. Superman became legend, the Kryptonian who wouldn't kneel, the last son of two worlds, the symbol of stubborn hope. Separatist propaganda called him a Republic weapon. Republic politicians tried to claim credit for his interventions. But the beings he saved knew the truth: Superman served no government, followed no military chain of command, and answered only to the principles his parents had instilled in a farmboy who'd been given power beyond measure and chosen to use it in service to others. And in the shadows, Darth Sidious watched and planned, recognizing that Superman represented not just a threat but an opportunity. The Kryptonian's very incorruptibility made him predictable in ways the Sith could exploit. His refusal to compromise created patterns that strategic minds could manipulate. His commitment to protecting everyone meant that sufficiently widespread crises would force impossible choices that would slowly, incrementally, break his spirit even if they couldn't corrupt his morals. The Clone Wars were far from over. The Sith's grand design remained intact despite disruptions. And Superman's journey in this galaxy had only just begun. But in the temple's highest chamber, as twin suns set over Coruscant's endless cityscape, Yoda stood alone and smiled. For 800 years, he'd watched the Jedi Order grow stagnant, comfortable, too certain of their righteousness and too blind to their limitations. Superman's arrival had shattered that complacency, forcing confrontation with uncomfortable truths about service, power, and the difference between following doctrine and pursuing justice. The future remained uncertain. The war's outcome unknown. The Sith's ultimate goals still hidden. But for the first time in decades, Yoda felt something he'd almost forgotten: hope. Not hope that victory was inevitable or that suffering could be eliminated. Hope that even in darkness, even facing enemies who'd spent millennia perfecting manipulation and control, even trapped in systems designed to perpetuate their own corruption, beings could still choose to be better. Could still refuse to accept that might made right, that ends justified means, that pragmatism required abandoning compassion. Superman embodied that choice. And his example, his stubborn, foolish, heroic insistence that power served people rather than the reverse, might just be enough to tip the balance in a galaxy that had forgotten what hope looked like. The symbol on his chest wasn't just Kryptonian heraldry. It was a promise, a declaration, a challenge to everyone who saw it. Hope isn't naive. Hope is the refusal to surrender to despair even when all logic suggests despair is rational. Hope is looking at impossible odds and choosing to try anyway, not because success is guaranteed but because trying matters more than winning. And in a galaxy far, far away, in a universe that wasn't his own, Superman would continue trying, protecting, investigating, fighting, saving, until he found his way home or until the stars themselves burned out. Because that's what heroes did. Not because it was easy or rewarding or strategically sound. But because it was right. May the Force be with you. More stories await.